Empire of Steel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 326, The Person Who Wants to Go to Heaven. P.S. There is one more chapter. Arriving around 10 o'clock, Lin Wentao, Xiaoming doesn't think this is a neurosis, but in the eyes of Lulu Ozira, it is indeed a neurosis. He said to Xiaolong, "Go to Bowen College to see if there is a person named Lin Wentao." Yes. After Xiaolong left, Lulu continued, "This person also said that when he gets the scholarship, he will give us the money to sew cloth bags for us." He said it exactly, Your Highness. He is really a student of Bowen College. It's hard to say, what can't these nerds do? Let's wait until Xiaolong comes back combining the cloth bag and flying into the sky. Xiaoming can easily think that this is a hot air balloon. The world's first hot air balloon was made in 1782 by the French papermakers Montgolfier brothers. This hot air balloon only flew to the roof. Later, they made a balloon with a diameter of 10 meters using linen and paper. Burn wet straw and shredded wool to generate hot fumes. King Louis V of France and the French Academy invited them to perform at the Palace of Versailles. At this point they hung a cage under the balloon with chickens, ducks and sheep in it. The balloon rose to a height of about 450 meters, floated in the air for 8 minutes, and landed in the Fakri forest 3 kilometers away. Now that history has changed. He doesn't know if there are hot air balloons in the West, but now it seems that someone at Bowen College wants to try it. Xiaolong went out and came back soon. He found this person named Lin Wentao at Bowen College. His Royal Highness, there really is someone. Lulu covered her mouth and laughed, as if she had encountered an interesting thing. Xiaolong was also smiling. He said, His Royal Highness, I also brought him. Xiaoming cast an admiring look at Xiaolong, and after being with him for a long time, Xiaolong understood his temper, knowing that he will definitely summon Lin Wentao. Xiaolong went out and walked in with Lin Wentao. After a while Lin Wentao greets His Highness. Xiaoming put down the pen and paper, stood up, and circled around Lin Wentao. This chemistry has a Lutong, but the extremely important physics is now. Few dare to try the things in the textbook. This Lin Wentao is the first I heard that you want a big cloth bag. Xiaoming asked, Why didn't you tell this king about it? His Royal Highness has a lot of time. How can I disturb His Highness because of such trivial matters? Lin Wentao said humbly. Xiaoming smiled. This Lin Wentao is not a nerd. His eyes are very flexible. He continued, You want to make a hot air balloon? Lin Wentao was stunned for a moment, then smiled bitterly. As expected, it is a hot air balloon. You're brave enough to fall down. Xiaoming said with a funny smile. Lin Wentao said, Lutong is not afraid of explosions, and I am not afraid of falling. They are all from Bowen College. I don't want to lose to Lutong, otherwise I will lose face as a scholar. Lutong was illiterate at first, as everyone knows, but Lutong is very eager to learn, and now he is indeed a top-notch person. Many scholars in the college looked down on Lutong, and now they were slapped in the face by Lutong, and they all naturally refused to accept it. This Lin Wentao is one of the early birds, the one who is ready to trade his life for face. Well, yes, you have the backbone, Lulu. You can sew a 10-meter balloon for them and let them test it themselves. Xiaoming said. Then Xiaoming said to Lin Wentao, Just tell this king if you need any more materials. Yes, Your Highness. Lin Wentao said excitedly. Xiaoming briefly talked about the hot air balloon and asked Lin Wentao to go back, and told him to pay attention to safety during the test. He could tie the hot air balloon to the ground to prevent the hot air balloon from flying away, so as to contact the operation of the hot air balloon. Lin Wentao responded again and again and went back happily. Lulu said at this time, Your Highness, this hot air balloon is so dangerous. Do you really want them to experiment? Isn't it more dangerous to fight? The king has taught everything that should be taught, and they are about to take the opportunity to turn the teaching materials into reality. Otherwise, no matter how much they learn, it will be just talk on paper, and it will be of no use. Last time, in order to see phosphorus, Lutong tried to find a way to extract phosphorus for teaching, so he made up his mind his task is to impart knowledge to the students of Bowen College. As for how to realize it, it is their problem. Otherwise, he will be a father and a mother. What is the use of these people? Lulu nodded thoughtfully. He now feels that King Qi is a little different from before. King Qi used to go to do everything by himself, but now he seems to be a hands-off shopkeeper, just giving orders when he needs anything, and letting the people below do the rest unless there are some problems. King Qi will not personally take action, including the sewing of cowhide sleeves in the textile workshop this time. King Ki just drew a picture and threw it to her, but she thought it was a good thing, because Xiaoming now has more leisure time looking at Xiaoming. Luluo's expression was complicated, as if she was hesitant to speak. Xiaoming came in from Luluo and found that Luluo was a little abnormal. He asked, "Luluo, do you have something to say?" Luluo's nervous palms were sweating, but she still summoned the courage to ask, "Your Highness, Brother Yu Yun said that my brother is now locked in Qingzhou prison by His Royal Highness. Is this true?" Xiaoming was suddenly stunned. He thought gloomily, this Yu Yun is really a big mouth, saying everything, but this can't blame him. After all, he just came back from the sea, and he doesn't know what he will do to Meng Yalian. This is true. Your brother is suspected of collaborating with the enemy. The matter has not been investigated yet, so this king has been keeping him in the prison and serving him deliciously. I didn't tell you about it, so as not to worry you. Luluo heard the words, her face turned pale, her lips were trembling, and she looked like she was about to cry. Xiaoming shook his head. He just didn't want to see Luluo like this. How could this girl be his own maid? He didn't want to see Luluo unhappy all day because of this, but this is the end. He said, "If you want to see your brother, I will not stop it. Maybe if you see your brother can tell the truth. Do you want to meet?" Luluo's expression suddenly became firm, and she said, "His Royal Highness, this servant wants to ask clearly, if he is really a collaborator and a traitor, then ask His Highness to kill him. You don't have to come to a conclusion so early." This time he risked his life to bring the Japanese country to attack Deng Zhao. If it is true, he is not a bad person. Luluo nodded lightly, bit her lip. She bowed and exited the dormitory. As soon as Luluo went out, Zhuang walked in. She glanced at Luluo with red eyes a little strangely, and asked with a smile, "Your Highness has bullied Luluo again. This king has no such interest now." Xiaoming shook his head. Aster gave a no and continued, "Your Highness, a man who claims to be Cao Zhengyang is asking to see him outside the door." Chapter 327 Hussian Chariot. Outside the palace of King Qi, Cao Zhengyang looked at the three gilded characters on the plaque, a little fascinated. Now that Yu Yun and others have returned to Qingzhou, they have fulfilled the promise of the Cao family. This time he came to Qingzhou again to open the Cao family's bank in the fief of King Qi. At the same time, he also brought a 2 million stone grains that the king of Chu sold to the king of Qi. It can be said that these real profits are the sincerity of the Cao family. This time, after waiting outside the door for a while, a palace servant led him into the Qi Wangfu. Along the way, he looked at the place and was a little surprised to find that the Qi Wangfu must be too simple. When he arrived at the main hall, he saw King Qi, who was already waiting there. He took a few steps and bowed. "Your Highness, last time you told your father about the matter of the northern barbarians. I don't know how the discussion went." Xiaowen held a scroll in his hand and looked a little lazy. "Go back to His Highness. This time His Highness is going to expedition the barbarians. Our Cao family is willing to donate 500,000 taels of supplies, hoping that His Highness will be able to win." Cao Zhengyang said loudly, 500,000 taels? Xiaoming suddenly smiled. This Cao family really made a lot of money. These 500,000 taels were enough for a quarter of the military expenses of the barbarians in this northern expedition. Cao Zhengyang nodded. "Your Highness, are you satisfied with this number?" "Satisfied, of course satisfied." In fact, when Xiaoming posted the Northern Expedition fundraising plan at the Chamber of Commerce, few businessmen from other places responded to the matter except for the local businessmen in Qingzhou. After all, many people did not believe that Xiaoming could win the battle against the barbarian. Cao Zhengyang laughed in agreement and put forward the real purpose of this time. "His Royal Highness, what about this Cao family bank? Since I promised you, this king will keep his promise, and your Cao family can open a bank in this king's fief. At present, Qingzhou Bank has not yet been established, and the government is short of money. Although the settlement of Kaojiakianshuang will have some impact on Qingzhou Bank in the early stage, in the long run, Kaojiakianshuang will not be able to compete with Qingzhou Bank in the later stage. After all, Xiaoming's ultimate goal is to establish a gold-based currency system, while Cao's bank is just a primitive bank based on silver. It will only take a few minutes to kill Cao's bank when he issues currency playing finance with him. The Cao family is still far away. It is for this reason that he allows the Cao family to enter Qingzhou to open a bank, because the current Cao family bank can promote the development of Qingzhou and provide financial support for fiefdoms and businessmen, and his positioning of the Cao family is only here. If the Cao family wants to choke him like Western capitalists, then the Cao family thinks too much. "Thank you, Your Highness. In addition to this, we will provide His Highness with 2 million stone grains during this period. plus the Cao family's grain. A total of 2.5 million stone grains will be given to His Highness, hoping to solve His Highness's urgent needs. This food is also the condition that the Cao family promised him at the beginning. And the purpose is also to establish a bank as a condition. It can be seen that the Cao family is very interested in this banking industry, and this kind of thinking in this era surpasses many businessmen from the Great Yu Kingdom. Xiao Ming nodded and smiled slightly to show his satisfaction now that the Cao family's tentacles have extended to King Zhao. He wants to make good use of the richest man in Dao. After this matter was settled, Cao Zhengyang left with great gratitude and gratitude. According to his plan, he was ready to buy real estate and build a bank in King Zhao. Watching Cao Zhengyang leave, Xiao Ming smiled. A local rich man didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. After sending Cao Zhengyang away, Xiao Ming went to the King Zhao camp without incident. Now the number of flintlock guns in the King Zhao army has reached 3,000, and there will be more flintlock guns in the next few months. It is also based on this that he is confident that he can launch an offensive against the barbarians in the autumn. Your Highness, let's practice. Okay. Lu Fei came over with a waist knife. After the flintlock gun was installed, Lu Fei and other generals still carried a saber. In this era of mixing hot and cold weapons, sometimes cold weapons also play a stabilizing role in hand-to-hand combat. Looking at the soldier Xiao Ming who is practicing the hollow square, he nodded. This formation has changed a bit, but the speed of the soldiers loading bullets needs to be improved. This is too slow, Xiao Ming said, looking at the soldiers who were simulating the loading of bullets at this speed. It is not bad that the soldiers of the King Zhao army can fire 2 bullets in 1 minute, and his requirement is a minimum of 3. Lu Fei scratched his head. The formations that are mainly practiced these days, this filling is a little less, and we will focus on strengthening them below. Xiao Ming continued to look at the other captains, some of whom were practicing bayonets with soldiers. Scarecrows have been tied up on the school field, and the soldiers are practicing bayonets against the scarecrows with bayonets. Another colonel distributed a wooden stick with a cloth on the head to the soldiers, and the soldiers were fighting with a wooden stick, which represented a bayonet. Yes, it seems that you have applied everything you learned in the school, Xiao Ming said. Lu Fei laughed and said, it's better that His Highness taught me. You don't need to be humble about this. You still need to come to the actual operation. By the way, where's the chariot of the chariot soldiers? How about the chariot made by the military workshop, His Royal Highness? This chariot is really good. Today, the military workshop just sent 3 vehicles. It is said that let us familiarize ourselves with the structure in advance. Lu Fei said. The 2 went all the way to the east of the school grounds, and Niu Ben was also here at this time. Speaking of this chariot, Niu Ben brought it up. He just made it clear at the meeting. After all, he is good at dealing with the cavalry. Niu Ben. He just designed the chariot. Your Highness. Niu Ben was explaining the formation to the soldiers. Xiao Ming looked at the chariot at this time. This chariot was not created by him, but a Hussite chariot in history. It was this chariot that once hit the Germanic cavalry. This Hussite chariot relies on the terrain in wartime and arranges the chariots in a square or circular array. Also, the chariots were chained from wheel to wheel at this time, so the chariots would be placed at an angle so that they could be quickly put on the whole horse. In addition, there is a thick layer of iron armor on the wall of the Huss chariot, and holes are reserved in the armor for shooting. Overall, this Hussite chariot looks like a box, like a mobile fortress, with equally sharp offense and defense. When attacking, the Hussite chariot can be placed close to the enemy, and the enemy can be provoked to attack with artillery fire. At this time, the musketeers hidden behind the car will attack with firearms, further weakening the enemy, and once the enemy has a tendency to collapse, the cavalry and musketeers in the middle of the chariot will swarm out to harvest the enemy's life. Chapter 328 Title System. His Royal Highness, the final commander, has configured the personnel of each chariot. Niu Ben pointed at the soldiers around the Huss chariot. These soldiers were specially prepared by him for the Hussite chariot. Although the cavalry could not use the Hussite chariot, generally the enemy would send heavy infantry to destroy the chariot before the cavalry charged. Therefore, a certain number of soldiers should also be equipped on each chariot to protect the chariot. Tell me the story. Xiao Ming's current focus is on training his subordinates. After all, he will need qualified generals to expand his territory in the future. It is not a good thing to do everything by himself, Niu Ben said. The chariot designed by His Royal Highness has 4 wheels, and 2 horses can move it. When forming a chariot array, the 4-wheeled chariot has a solid foundation, and it can also quickly form a chariot array when encountering cavalry. In order to prevent the barbarians from sending slave soldiers to destroy the chariots, the final commander will prepare 18 soldiers on each chariot, including 10 musketeers, 6 swordsmen, and 2 charioteers, Xiao Ming was very satisfied with Niu Ben's configuration. The musketeer could kill and injure the cavalry and infantry rushing over from a long distance, while the sword and shield could prevent the infantry from climbing on the Hussite chariot. These soldiers moved with the army in Hussite chariots, which meant that they could go into battle as soon as they saw the enemy. Just follow this configuration. When soldiers from other states arrive, let them mix musketeers for drills. There is not much time left for Xiao Ming. Before the barbarians wait for the opportunity to go south, he must make his army able to form a fighting force, so that he will not be destructively attacked by the barbarian cavalry on the battlefield in the future. After checking the first Hussite chariot, Xiao Ming checked the training of the soldiers under the command of the other captains before returning to the palace. It is one thing to install the flintlock gun, but the training of the King's Zhao army is another matter. Only strict training and discipline can make the flintlock gun exert its advantages on the battlefield. Returning to the palace, Xiao Ming continued to devote himself to the great task of compiling textbooks. This time, whether it was Lu Tong or Lin Wenteo's performance, it showed that the textbooks he wrote played their role among them. This teaching material is not waste paper, but knowledge. Now the students of Bowen College are slowly accepting the knowledge that they have never been exposed to before, and are trying to turn this knowledge into reality, and this is what Xiao Ming is happy to see. Only when more and more people accept scientific knowledge can the seeds of cultural rejuvenation germinate slowly, until one day it erupts like a volcano. Therefore, in view of this, Xiao Ming is more and more motivated. Some time ago, he compiled textbooks for junior high school, and now he plans to compile textbooks for high school. In addition, he also plans to set up its own laboratory for each college, so that the students of each college can use their talents to learn at the same time. He spent 2 months running around the King's Zhao camp, the Chamber of Commerce, the military workshop, and the slave plantation circle, supervising military training, King's Zhao commodity export, flintlock production and seedling cultivation. Last year, King's Zhao moved so fast that many institutions were very imperfect in terms of personnel and rules and regulations. Therefore, during this time, Xiao Ming was not in a hurry to come up with new things, but to implement and improve the functions of each institution down to earth. In the King's Zhao army, after discussing with Niu Ben and other generals, he announced the establishment of a military court. Xiao Ming wrote some relevant laws and handed it over to Niu Ben. The law stipulates penalties for violating the military system. For example, desertion is a death sentence, women are sentenced to death, and military secrets are leaked, and military products are sold. These military regulations are all from later generations. Xiao Ming revised it according to the contemporary situation and handed it over to Niu Ben, and these systems are ready-made and perfect, ready to use. He also perfected the laws of King's Zhao and published the legal provisions in newspapers, so that the people of King's Zhao knew what was illegal at the same time, in order to inspire people from all walks of life in King's Zhao to make contributions to King's Zhao. He further upgraded the incentive measures. Those who have made great contributions will be awarded titles, and these titles will go from high to low, and those who get titles will get the status and private property that match the titles: County Duke, County Marquess, County Uncle, County Son, County Male. Pang Yukin in the Governor Mansion read out the titles listed by Xiao Ming one by one. There are 8 in total. This title system came from the Tang dynasty. In fact, there are also princes and heirs, but these 2 titles are obviously too big, and he can't afford them, Xiao Ming, so he can only take out the last 8 titles. Pang Changshi, what do you think of this king's thoughts, governing the title to a commoner? Pang Yukin couldn't describe it as surprise. There are also titles in the Great Yu Kingdom, but these titles are not the royal family and nobles, but the belongings of the clans, and these titles are generally the rewards for the meritorious ministers at the time of the founding of the country. Now Xiao Ming has even given his title to anyone who can contribute to King's Zhao. Yes, but these titles are just honorary titles, and of course they can also get hereditary land. Xiao Ming said with a smile. Pang Yukin was still in shock, and then he asked, so what kind of title should your highness get for what kind of merit? Xiao Ming had already prepared for this, and he handed over the corresponding merit requirements. He wrote to Pang Yukin. Opening the merit book, Pang Yukin took a serious look. The division of scholars, peasants, business and industry is very detailed. He did not expect that officials can also obtain titles if they have made significant contributions. In addition, craftsmen rely on technology, students rely on inventions and creations, and soldiers rely on military merit to obtain the corresponding title. Among them, only the baron can get 300 acres of Yangaiyan, which is equivalent to hereditary land. The titles above are gradually increasing. After reading the merit book, Pang Yukin said slowly, His Royal Highness is really a maverick. In the past, this title was only given to those who made military merits, but now any contribution will get the title, which will greatly intensify the 4 classes of fiefs: agriculture, industry and commerce. The officials have no opinion on such incentive measures. Xiao Ming nodded. Since this is the case, this king will ask the newspaper to publish this matter in the newspaper for tomorrow. Pang Yukin smiled and nodded slightly. If it was before, he would definitely have opposed it, but Xiao Ming has proved that many of his strange policies are right for more than a year now. He supports every policy proposed by Xiao Ming, unless the policy is too outrageous. With the affirmation of Pang Yukin, Xiao Ming handed over the promotion of the title to the newspaper. In fact, for Xiao Ming, this title is second. And the most important thing is that this title represents a kind of honor. What he wants to build is a king's house that attaches great importance to honor and loyalty. Chapter 329 Crazy Ambition. Can ordinary people get titles too? In Zhuji village, Zhu Wuliu raised his head and asked the reporters who came to read the newspaper. Well, His Highness in the newspaper clearly stated that as long as anyone who has made significant contributions to King's House can get the title, and compared to the title of the title, there will be hereditary land. The lowest county male is 300 acres of hereditary fertile land, and the government will not have it in the future. The right to reclaim these lands is basically private territory. The person reading the newspaper was reporter Zhang, who came to Zhuji village on a designated basis. When he read the news, his whole body was full of enthusiasm, and he had the urge to have a big fight. After all, this title is too tempting. Once the title is obtained, it will not only be a great honor, but will also mean a prosperous life in the future. Zhu Wuliu's saliva was left behind. The road section he contracted in King's House was basically completed. During this time, he was also free and had time to listen to the news reporter. You continue to read, how do we people get the title? This is not easy. For example, you Zhu Wuliu, unless you can raise 5,000 horses, you can get the title of county baron. The reporter said with a smile. 5,000 horses. Zhu Wuliu stuck out his tongue. The horse administration in King's House stipulates that one family is enough to keep one fine horse. What are you doing with these 5,000 horses? So you need a huge contribution. Do you think you can become a county man by picking up a dung ball on the side of the road? Reporter Zhang shook his head. Of course, this is just an analogy. If you can excel in a certain industry, I still hope if you get a title, you can't raise horses, but you can raise chickens and ducks. The villagers burst into laughter when they heard this. Then reporter Zhang explained the specific rewards one by one, and the people nodded frequently, thinking about where they could contribute. In addition to Zhuji village, the discussion about titles in King's House City became more intense in Bowen College. A group of students gathered around and trembled with excitement. Although they were admitted to the Bowen College, they were not interested in learning these strange knowledge at all, let alone doing research and invention. It can be said that in Bowen College, they are just dawdling, and after graduation, they hope to be assigned to a certain department in King's House like them. Most of the students have this idea. They studied hard in the past 10 years just to enter the official career, and this strong idea has never been eliminated. Even though Xiao Ming introduced a monetary reward system last time, it was far from enough stimulation for them, because pretending to be arrogant is a common problem for many scholars. But it's different now. The common people don't know what this title is, but they know very well that in the Great Yu Kingdom, this is a title that belongs to the royal family and nobles. The purpose of scholar officials is to flourish and shine on the lintel, and now this title is simply too much for their taste in their eyes. A bright road that is not the imperial examination is better than the imperial examination. Was born. Brother Wen Tao, did you say that your hot air balloon needs an experimental person? In the cafeteria of Bowen College, a student put down the newspaper and stared straight at Lin Wentao. Lin Wentao, who was thinking about how to provide continuous heat to the hot air balloon, turned his head dully and said casually, yes, but this may kill people. It's okay, let me come, for King's House, for His Highness, I have no regrets in dying. The scholar grabbed Lin Wentao's hand. Lin Wentao is obsessed with his hot air balloon these days, but he doesn't have time to read the newspaper and doesn't know what happened. He turned his head and saw that the students of the physics school sitting around were staring straight at him. Very strange. Before he could speak, the other students roared, let me get fat in the future, so I'm not afraid of falling. I have rough skin and thick flesh. It's okay to fall off a tree when I was a child. Let me come. Another person shouted, let me. Chamber of Commerce. The merchants who came to purchase the goods had already forgotten about the purchase at this time, but gathered together in twos and threes, and said excitedly with a newspaper in their hands, His Royal Highness is wise and martial, as if Yao and Shun were alive. I didn't expect our merchants to have such a day outside the Chamber of Commerce. Ding Wu laughed loudly. Scholars, industry and commerce, our merchant status has always been the lowest. Your Highness is generous. Not only has the status of merchants been raised in King Zhao, but now we have a share of this title. Dai Zixing was very excited. Fortunately, the two of us joined the King Zhao household registration early, otherwise there would be no such good things. At this moment, Ding Wu suddenly felt that his father was really far-sighted. At this moment, he suddenly saw hope. In his dream, he would get this honorary title and would not be discriminated against by others. Dai Zixing nodded frequently, and Ding Wu also contracted a section of the road in King Zhao City, where he bought a lot of cement pipes, and only two people knew each other. His Royal Highness takes care of me so much. If we can't live up to His Highness's good intentions, we must do our part diligently for King Zhao's business in the future. Dai Zixing said seemingly unintentionally. Ding Wu's expression stiffened. Although Dai Zixing's words were unintentional, they stabbed in his heart. Ding Wuquan was his father and a member of King Wei. Now he is suddenly a little worried that he will be involved in some unnecessary things, because his current goal is to work hard to manage his industry in King Zhao, and now he has one more, get a title, and live honorably in King Zhao. In the Pingjiafang in the southeast corner of King Zhao, Xiao Hengyang is instructing someone to move the luggage to the house. This is the house he just bought in King Zhao, and it will be where he lives in King Zhao in the future. At this moment, a man who looked like a housekeeper hurried over and handed him a newspaper. Xiao Hengyang was a little surprised when he glanced at the newspaper's eye-catching headline, and his expression suddenly became complicated when he looked down. This visit to King Zhao may be the most correct choice for the Xiao family. King Qi seems to be deeply influenced by the Western priest, so my Xiao family will be like a duck to water, and the prosperity of Western business cannot be realized in King Zhao. Xiao Hengyang held the newspaper in his hand, and his eyes were filled with an inexplicable ambition. If this is the case, I need to report back to my father to support King Qi, and I must guide King Qi to learn from the West. In this way, my Xiao family can be passed down from generation to generation like a Western business family, and the incense will never die. To make this decision, Xiao Hengyang immediately wrote a letter and asked a housekeeper to send it to Linen expeditiously. At the same time, he also stuffed the newspaper from King Zhao into the envelope. With a newspaper from King Zhao as proof, he believed that his father would be more firm in his determination. Determined to slowly transfer the Xiao family's industry to King Zhao. Chapter 330 War Outpost. King Zhao Secret Guard. After receiving the news from Yuan Zhao, Wang Zhuan immediately went to Qi Wangfu. In these days when King Qi reformed the King Zhao system, the situation in Yuanzhou took a turn for the worse. But this is not the most important, because the 60,000 cavalry headed by Chagatai seems to have seized the opportunity at this time, and has already moved south in two directions to serve as the vanguard of this barbarian attack on Jizhao. What? Chagatai has gone south? Xiao Ming's expression changed slightly when he heard the news. Wang Zhuan nodded. The news can't be wrong, King Yuan, you stupid pig. Xiao Ming slapped the table heavily. His plans would never catch up with the changes, and his plans were all disrupted by the pig team at Yongqing. Although he had already had a hunch after the civil unrest in Yuanzhou, it happened too quickly, and the letter of admonition he gave to King Yong last time has not been heard from now, and it is estimated that King Yong has long since thrown it somewhere. This King Yong has always been stubborn and does not listen to people's persuasion. Under this crisis, he still does not hit the south wall and does not turn back. What should I do, Your Highness? Jizhao is only 200 miles away from Yunzhou. This time, King Yong used most of his troops to fight the rebellion. At this time, the city of Jizhao is bound to be empty. If it is taken by the barbarians, the door to the fief will be like the barbarians have opened up. Xiao Ming pondered for a while, and said, the barbarians must not be allowed to burn the flames of war on this king's fief. You go and call Niu Ben and others. Yes. Wang Zhuan responded and turned away. He has been busy with reforming things for nearly 2 months. It is now late July. According to his plan, he will expedition the barbarians to the north in October. Now that the barbarians go south, he loses 3 months of preparation, so now his army is only equipped with 10,000 flintlock guns. The Guanyin Iron Cavalry plus the King's Hao Cavalry are only more than 10,000 people, and the Hus Chariot is only 300. This is the result of all his money being spent on military spending. Wang Zhuan quickly brought Niu Ben and other King's Hao generals over. On the way, Wang Zhuan told Niu Ben and others about the news. His Royal Highness, the entire army must go to Yunzhou now, and support at any time according to the situation in Jizhao. If the barbarian cavalry is allowed to enter the fief, it will definitely cause serious damage to the fief. Niu Ben said after a pause. He continued, but your highness doesn't have to worry too much. There is no food for people in Jizhao, which means that the walls are clear. Chagatai can only attack Yunzhao only by capturing Jizhao city. This King Yuang is really faint. How is this fief managed? Lu Fei cursed. Xiaoming sighed when he heard this. He was not afraid of a wolf-like opponent, but was afraid of a pig-like teammate. While everyone was discussing, Zhuan suddenly ran in and said to Xiaoming, Your Highness, the 800 miles from Chang'an have arrived in a hurry. Xiaoming and Niu Ben looked at each other, and he immediately walked out with the generals. A postal general was waiting at the door with a letter in his hand. Xiaoming took the letter from the postmaster and opened it up. He said to Niu Ben, My father asked this king to send troops to help King Yang to quell the rebellion and jointly defend against the barbarian cavalry going south. Why didn't King Yang send one soldier when we were guarding Kangzhou, but now let us help King Yang? The emperor is too partial. Lu Fei said. Dissatisfied. Niu Ben frowned. He was also dissatisfied with this matter and felt wronged for King Qi under the circumstances at that time. Xiaoming was the weakest among the many vassal kings, and the heavy responsibility of resisting the barbarians was on his shoulders. It's just that he also understands that grievances are one thing at this time, but they can't just sit back and ignore it. After all, if the barbarians capture Jizhao, they will be the enemy in this case. Don't talk about it. This time, even if the emperor does not order, we have to go to Jizhao. Since the order has arrived, we can go to Jizhao in a logical way, not to mention that the imperial army and the army of the king of Wei have already moved to Jizhao. Xiao Ming said. Have the imperial army and King Wei's army set off? Niu Ben and the others heaved a sigh of relief. This time they were not fighting alone. It looks heavy on the surface, but Xiaoming has long been looking forward to bringing troops into Jizhao. The Jizhao chaos was both a crisis and an opportunity for him. During the Three Kingdoms period, Cao conquered 300,000 Kingzhao troops and has since risen from the sky. It can be seen that this rich population brought dividends to Cao these days, although Pang Yukan sent people to Jizhao to guide the refugees into Kingzhao, but the effect was very small. Moreover, in times of disaster, human traffickers are often rampant and deceived, and the victims cannot easily trust the people sent by Pang Yukan. However, if the Kingzhao army entered Jizhao, the effect would be different, and the victims would naturally believe in the guidance of the army. Xiaoming has been reading The King of Kings during this time. It is mentioned that a qualified monarch has the power of a lion, and the cunning of a fox can survive in the current chaotic situation. He has to be black-bellied, not to mention that he has to pay a fee for sending troops to Jizhao. Decided to go to Jizhao, Xiaoming ordered Niu Ben and others to go to Jizhao with 10,000 cavalry, 2,000 crossbowmen, 3,000 spearmen, 5,000 swordsmen, 10,000 musketeers and 300 Hussite chariots, leaving the troops of other states to guard their respective prefectures and counties. At the same time, let Pang Yukan open the civilian Wubao. Once the barbarians enter the fief, they will organize the people to hide in Wubao to minimize losses like the previous battles. The most serious problem in going to Jizhao this time was logistics. However, last year Xiaoming ordered the prefectures to reserve food for war, and the food stored in Yunzhao city should be enough to support his trip to Jizhao this time. Therefore, compared to the past, his food and grass pressure this time is a little easier, but after leaving Yunzhao, the logistics will be troublesome again. Not to mention this time Niu Ben also brought 30 artillery pieces to Jizhao, and he had to draw horses along the way carried by people. Although he got the news in time, the war was not a trip that just left. After 10 days of preparations for ammunition and weapons, Niu Ben took more than 20,000 people to Yunzhao in this battle. Xiaoming is not going to go to Jizhao to follow the blind mix. Now everyone has to perform their own duties. He is responsible for the overall planning of the fiefs. The soldiers are responsible for fighting, and the officials are responsible for assisting him sending off the Kingzhao army at the gate of the Kingzhao camp. Xiaoming was a little worried in his heart. Kingzhao has only been exposed to firearms for 3 or 4 months, and he can't guarantee how he will perform on the battlefield, so this time the musket team only accounted for 1/3, but this step will sooner or later go out for him, and it will be more able to sharpen the soldiers on the battlefield and gain practical combat experience. Of course, he explained that Nilben's most important task was to collect victims. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331 Jizhao News. On July 25, after a 6-day trek, Niu Ben led 30,000 troops into Yunzhao. At the same time, he received news that the 60,000 cavalry of Chagatai had approached Jizhao. One of the 10,000-strong teams bypassed Jizhao and came to Yunzhao. Taking out the map drawn by King Qi, Niu Ben analyzed the current situation in the Yunzhao army camp. Lu Fei, Luo Zin, Qi Guanggai, and Bai Muzhu all surrounded the map. That's great. 50,000 cavalry is a problem. We're not afraid of 10,000 people. Let them taste the power of our musket team. Lu Fei said excitedly. Niu Ben frowned. It's unusual for this cavalry to go deep alone. You immediately send hussars out to investigate and keep an eye on their movements. Lu Fei nodded. This hussar is a division of the King's Hao cavalry after the reorganization. This cavalry type does not wear any armor, and the horses are also light and simple, and the horses are also the fastest among the King's Hao cavalry. And these hussars are not only responsible for the rapid assault mission, but also responsible for detecting the enemy's situation. Yes. Lu flew a military salute. At this time, Niu Ben said to Qi Guanggai, this time, His Highness asked us to send troops to Jizhao to gather the victims. Qi Guanggai, you led 5,000 cuirassiers to Jizhao to gather the victims and guide them into Yunzhao. Qi Guanggai also responded loudly. Then Niu Ben said to the remaining generals, you immediately organize musketeers, charioteers, bowmen, and sword and shieldmen to fight at any time. You must not let this group of cavalry enter the hinterland of the fief. Yes, the generals shouted in unison. After making a battle plan, Niu Ben walked out of the barracks. At this time, Kong Yonggan, the governor of Yunzhao outside the barracks, was waiting for him. Inspector Kong, this time the army is stationed in Yunzhao. There is so much harassment. I hope that Inspector Kong will not take offense. Niu Ben said with his fists folded. Kong Yonggan said, Captain Niu, what you said is wrong. We are all looking forward to you coming. Recently, there have been rumors in the city that the Qinglong King is going to attack Yunzhao city to grab food. The people in the city are very uneasy. Now you come, we can be at ease. Niu Ben sneered. This Qinglong King is so arrogant that he dares to attack Yunzhao's idea. Doesn't he know that this is King Qi's fief? Jizhao has no food. This Qinglong King is also rebelling against the masses, and the people under him can't stand it without food. Kong Yonggan said. Niu Ben sighed. As His Highness said, it really is an internal and external trouble now. In Jizhao city, King Yuan was pacing anxiously at this time. His home general, Chen Xinren, came. And has the Forbidden Army come? Has King Wei's army come? Or has King Qi's army come? King Yuan asked with red eyes. This time he was really anxious. The civil turmoil in the fief was still unresolved. At this time, the barbarian army came again. Now Chagatai is leading cavalry to loot outside the city of Jizhao and surround the city of Jizhao. The fief army who came to help Jizhao was killed by the barbarian cavalry. In the wild, his army was no match for the barbarian cavalry. His Royal Highness, no, the barbarian cavalry is still outside the city, and there is no battle with any army. All the troops in the city have already boarded the city wall. Chen Xinren said. When King Yong heard the words, he suddenly became furious. He pushed all the teacups on the table to the ground. These bastards! This king is about to die. Why haven't they come to save me? Bastard! Bastard! Chen Xinren lowered his head and did not dare to make a sound. King Yong has always been violent. When he was young, King Yong was also a very brave warrior. It was just the rich life of more than 20 to 30 years that made King Yong's body bloated. Now King Yong only understands every day, and no longer has the bravery of the year. The only constant is his violent temper and headstrong personality. The severe drought in Jizhao since July last year should not have developed to this point, but King Yong did not care about the disaster. But this is the second thing. From Chang'an, the grains and forges of the fiefs of various vassal kings were deducted layer by layer. When it came to King Yong also deducted most of them, and the remaining part was sold to grain merchants. These grains also include 100,000 stone grains from Qinghao. If these grains are used for disaster relief, perhaps the civil unrest will not get bigger and bigger. When King Qi sent a letter to persuade him, King Yong just glanced at the letter and burned it, leaving only the sentence "Shuzi." With a sigh in his heart, Chen Xinren suddenly felt a trace of sadness. The people in Jizhao were in chaos, and the barbarian invasion was at it at this time. I am afraid that this time Jizhao city is more fortunate than fortune. At this time, King Yong can see that the situation is critical, but at this time their fate can no longer be controlled by themselves. His Royal Highness, but the number of cavalry outside the city is now 10,000 fewer, and a 10,000-strong team seems to have gone to Yunzhao. Chen Xinren recalled a message and said, going to Yunzhao, great, great, maybe these cavalry are going to attack Qingqi, just staying in Jizhao, yes, yes, it must be like this, haha, now you go to Chengtao immediately with the barbarian leader said, King Zhao had a bumper harvest last year, and there was a lot of food, if they are willing to go to Jizhao to loot, we are willing to donate food and grass. King Yuang walked a few steps to Chen Xinren, looking like a madman, Your Highness, this is collaborating with the enemy. Chen Xinren said. King Yuang immediately changed his face and said angrily, what's wrong with collaborating with the enemy and not collaborating with the enemy? Now Qingqi's death is better than this king's death? I haven't enjoyed enough in this flowery world, and now there are many kings in the great Yu kingdom, each managing their own affairs, sooner or later. Like Daiguo, the vassal king finally becomes the king himself, then he is the enemy of the king. Chen Xinren was suddenly speechless facing King Yuang's fierce eyes. He sighed and walked towards the city wall. At this time, hundreds of miles away from Yunzhao city, the hussars who went out for reconnaissance had already found a 10,000-strong barbarian team moving towards Yunzhao on a plain. These barbarian cavalry were fighting a group of chaotic troops with various agricultural implements. Although the number of the chaotic army is large, the barbarian cavalry is very fierce. Arranging in a circle on the plain to surround the chaotic army in the middle and constantly shoot arrows in their hands, the besieged chaotic army was shot and killed by arrows without being able to reach the barbarian horses. The hussars looked at the banner of the chaotic army, which clearly had the 3 characters of Qinglong King written on it, which must be part of the chaotic army, and never expected to encounter the cavalry of the barbarians staying in place and continuing to observe. The chaotic army quickly disintegrated after the fierce battle this hour. At this time, the barbarian cavalry took out their saber and kept slashing and killing the fleeing chaotic soldiers. However, the pair of cavalrymen did not seem to want to be entangled with the chaotic army, so they quickly regrouped and set off for Yunzhao again. Seeing this, the hussars immediately headed for Yunzhao city. He also saw the food and grass on the horses of the barbarian cavalry. It seemed that the barbarians were planning to go to Yunzhao. Chapter 332. Both sides. Commander, the barbarian general who led the 10,000 team this time is called Qiuhe. Report to the governor. Now the barbarian 10,000-strong team is less than 100 miles away from Yunzhao. Reporting to the governor, the barbarian cavalry slaughtered and looted along the way, and the victims of Jizhao suffered heavy casualties. In the Yunzhao camp, the hussars who went out to investigate kept returning to report the news they got. Crack. After a lot of news came, Lu Fei slammed the table and said angrily, Captain, the barbarians are fighting back with fire. They are going to use the same method as we did on the grasslands to harass the fief. Niu Ben's expression was solemn. He finally understood why a 10,000-strong team broke away from the main force of the barbarian cavalry and came towards Yunzhao. Qiuhe? This name is somewhat familiar. Luo Xin suddenly frowned. The last will remember Wang Zhuan once mentioned it. When Niu Ben heard the words, he suddenly remembered, and he said, this Qiuhe is a warrior under Chagatai. But the last time I led my cavalry into the grasslands, I attacked his tribe and took the hordes of his tribe. Men and women, young and old, were slaughtered. Wang Zhuan has been in charge of collecting information on the grassland tribes, and the information on the generals on the grasslands has now been provided to the King Zhao army. If this is the case, it will be even more dangerous, and Qiuhe will definitely take revenge on our people. Lu Fei was worried. The other generals looked worried at the same time. Niu Ben pondered for a while, and he said, the barbarians have been collecting intelligence in King Zhao, and I must have known that I led the troops to destroy his tribe. Qiuhe came here with hatred. If you knew that I led 10,000 infantry to help Jizhao, you said that he would. Won't you take revenge? Qiuhe's character is violent, not necessarily, but it's too dangerous for the governor to do so. Lu Fei said it's not necessarily dangerous. Qiuhe didn't know that the King Zhao army had installed a flintlock gun. His Highness said that he would make a surprise attack while the barbarians were unfamiliar with a flintlock gun. Therefore, we may not lose. Luo Xin nodded. We found that Qiuhe's 10,000-strong team has lost the opportunity. Maybe we can set up a hollow phalanx on the only road that Qiuhe must pass, and set up a cover for Qiuhe. Niu Ben nodded. He looked at the map, pointed to a place 30 kilometers outside Yunzhao city, and said, the hussars have already surveyed this place. The road is very wide, with grass on both sides of the road, and woods outside the grass. Qiuhe has to take this road if he wants to enter the hinterland. The country of Deu is different from the grassland. However, in the country of Deu, The custom of farming civilization is to set up the city in the traffic fortress, and the barbarian cavalry can pass around the city without attacking the city, but they must take a spacious official road of course. The barbarian cavalry can also choose to take the trail to avoid the official road and go straight to the rear city, but in the case of unfamiliar life, few generals will choose this kind of risky behavior. After all, an army who does not pay attention will face the danger of getting lost. Based on this, Niubenke decided to place the army on the broad official road. After demarcating the battle site, Niuben immediately ordered the musket team, charioteer, and artillery to go to the designated place to prepare for the battle. After receiving the order, Lu Fei and Lu Ozin immediately dispatched troops. Now, Quhu is only 100 miles away from Yunzhao City. According to the barbarians' marching speed, they can reach outside Yunzhao City tomorrow, and this is still based on the barbarians marching at full speed. In fact, a horse is an animal with poor endurance. It can sprint, but a long-distance horse must run for a while and then stop and rest, otherwise it will only ruin the horse's running. It's just that the barbarians often have one person and 4 horses, so this time Niuben assumed the fastest marching speed of the barbarians. That night, Yunzhao City went out of the city overnight and set up a battle on the official road outside Yunzhao City, just waiting for Quhu to come. At the same time, taking advantage of the reconnaissance, Niuben constantly sent hussars to inquire, and hung his flag high to deliberately lure Quhu to come. At this time, 50 kilometers away from Yunzhao City, Quhu was leading a cavalry brigade to approach Yunzhao City along the official road. The scouts kept bringing the collected news. This time, the plan to bypass Yunzhao and directly take Yunzhao City was formulated by Chagatai, and he was the first to undertake this attack plan. After losing all his clansmen, hatred spreads in his heart day by day. As long as he can get revenge, Quhu is willing to lose his life. Captain Wan, we found the Yunzhao army 20 miles away, and they seem to have set up a battle and are waiting for us, the scout said. Quhu frowned. Why does the Yunzhao army find us in advance every time? The scouts were silent, and he didn't know either. Now, none of the Yunzhao army scouts found him, but the Yunzhao army seemed to know their whereabouts very well, and he also didn't understand. After hesitating for a while, he said, ignore them. This time we will bypass Yunzhao City and take Yunzhao directly, and loot the grain and grass near Yunzhao City. The turmoil in Jizhao gave them an opportunity. Last year, the severe cold on the grasslands froze to death a lot of livestock, and it was the first time that the Golden Horde had food problems. For this reason, various tribes sold many slaves to save food, and more slaves were killed to save food. The most important task for them going south this time was looting. Only when they passed through Jizhao, they saw only barren land, hungry and mad victims, and they couldn't find food at all in Jizhao. After deliberation, Chagatai asked him to go to Yunzhao to retaliate. It's just that we have no other way to go except the official road, the scout said. Idiot, can't you grab a local person to ask for directions? Why don't you go quickly? Quhu said angrily. The scouts left in response, when another scout arrived and said, Captain Wan, the Yunzhao army in front are all infantry and chariots, with only a few cavalry, and the word Niuben is written on the flag in the middle. Bull Run. The name instantly made Quhu's eyes red. Now they have understood who was looting on the grasslands. One was Lu Fei, the other was Niuben, and Niuben was his enemy. I'm going to kill him. Quhu's chest heaved violently, and he was about to rush out after pulling the reins. At this time, a commander said, Quhu, this is probably a trap. We can't fall for the tricks of the people of Daiyu. Quhu gasped violently, and after a long time he calmed down the anger in his heart. Calmed down and continued to wait for the scouts' news. An hour later, the scouts came to the news that there was no one in the village outside the city of Yunzhao, and all the people fled. When Quhu heard the words, his heart burst into arrogance, and at this time another scout came to report that there were only more than 10,000 Yunzhao troops blocking the road ahead. The consumption of food and fodder for the march was huge, and if the time was delayed here, the soldiers and horses would starve. Knowing that the Yunzhao army had only more than 10,000 people and was far away from the city in the wild, Quhu finally made up his mind, send scouts to find out if there are ambushed in the woods on both sides, and the rest will follow me. Chapter 333 Sandwich Biscuits. Niuben was waiting for Quhu to come. When he learned that the barbarians were about to enter Yunzhao, he ordered the evacuation of all the people outside the city. The people either fled into the deep mountains, entered the city, or entered Wubao, without leaving any food at home. After the order was issued, he fully realized the role of the militia and the production team in the civil society, and these two agencies gave full play to their responsibilities and cooperated with their work quickly and effectively. After the people hid in Wubao, The militia also rallied and became another force against the barbarians. Therefore, he chose to meet the enemy here, and he was 90% sure that Kyuha would choose to take risks. First came to Chagatai this time. Only the forward brought a lot of food, and the long journey must consume 7 or 8. Second, Kyuha wanted to kill him and then hurry up. Third, Kyuha wanted to find one if he wanted to avoid the official road. People who are familiar with the roads of Yunzhou led the way, but now he may not be easy to find. As for the remaining 10%, even if Kyuha Hanksin walked the trail, he wouldn't be afraid. After all, since it was a trail, the road was naturally not as smooth as the official trail, and there would be many mountains, forests, and swamps around, so he could ambush at the key points. Captain, Kyuha's cavalry has moved and is coming here. A hussar's voice broke Niu Ben's contemplation. There was a smile on the corner of his mouth, and Niu Ben shouted, "The whole army is ready." As his voice fell, a rhythmic bugle sounded, and the King's Hao army soldiers immediately moved. The chariots were the first to act. At this time, the chariots driving the Hussite chariots immediately began to change their formation from the column. The 300 Hussian chariots were divided, and 3 square defensive formations were besieged. Each Hussite chariot designed by Xiaoming is 5 meters long, and 100 Hussite chariots add up to 500 meters long. With a gap between the chains, one side of a square defensive formation is nearly 200 meters long. The 3 Hussite chariot formations are staggered from each other, like a zigzag shape, and each box-shaped chariot is staggered from each other, like the edges and corners of European bastions, which can exert maximum firepower. The charioteer driving the Hussite chariot stopped and immediately jumped off, pulling up the chains at the rear of the Hussite chariot, and each Hussian chariot was connected to each other with chains at the same time. The driver removed the bars and harnesses of the Hussian chariot, but the driver still tethered the horses to the inside of the chariot barriers, and came in handy again when needed. The horses will be protected by riders and swordsmen. The square chariot formation was completed. At this time, the musketeers immediately relied on the Hussite chariot and lined up along the edge of the square chariot, forming a strange hollow battle with the inner layer of the Hussite chariot and the outer layer of 3 rows of musketeers. Line the internal artillery of the Hussite chariot, the muzzle of the artillery was extended from the gap, and 1,000 cuirassiers also lined up neatly in the chariot, ready to attack at any time. This kind of tactics was decided by Xiaoming and Niu Ben after the same research. It was because of his trust in this battle formation that Xiaoming dared to decide to rush to Jizhou with a small amount of troops and the King's Hao army. This battle formation with musketeers standing on the outside, soldiers hidden inside the chariot, and cavalry on standby inside was called the Sandwich Biscuit Battle Formation. Of course, only Xiaoming could come up with this title. After the battle formation was completed, Niu Ben and other generals were protected by a Hussian formation behind. After completing the arrangement of the Sandwich Biscuit battle array, everyone waited for the arrival of Kyuha. If it was before, Niu Ben would never have fought 10,000 cavalry in such an open field, because even 30,000 infantry would not be a match for 10,000 barbarian cavalry. But now, relying on this unprecedented battle formation, he believes that 10,000 musketeers, 3,000 cavalry, and 4,000 chariots are enough to defeat the barbarian cavalry in the wild, and before that, he never dared to think about it. Without 5 times the strength, the army of the Great Yu Kingdom would not dare to fight against the barbarian cavalry in the wild. While waiting, the dust raised by the cavalry gradually appeared not far away, and soon, the barbarian cavalry appeared in front of the King's Hao army 300 meters away. Kyuha's cavalry stopped and began to adjust the formation, facing each other on the open land that stretched for 6 miles. Are the King's Hao army crazy? Kyuha looked at King's Hao, who was wearing a dark green military uniform and holding a strange spear weapon, and said lightly. The other centurions were also confused. The King's Hao army in front of them not only did not gather together in a tight formation, but instead divided into 3 square formations. For them, this was simply courting death. Crossing the 3 rows of soldiers in front, Kyuha looked at the cavalry who were protected in the middle. These cavalry were only 3,000 people, and these cavalry were not enough for him. He looked at the chariot behind the soldier and was slightly stunned. He really couldn't understand the arrangement of the King's Hao army. Now, Commander, what kind of strange formation is this? Why have we never seen it before? A commander asked. I've never seen such a strange battle formation. Kyuha stared at the last battle formation as he spoke. In particular, the striking bull character made Kyuha's eyes gradually redden. In the past, the King's Hao army fought behind the city wall, but now it is a natural advantage for the barbarians to be in such a vast area. The 2 sides stood still, staring at each other, and after a deadly silence, Information from a barbarian scout broke the silence. "No ambush," said the scout. "Kill." At this moment, Kyuha raised the machete in his hand, and Kyuha's cavalry lined up in a 300-meter-long queue on the 6-mile-wide plain and rushed towards the King's Hao army. Like the previous experience of barbarians fighting in the grasslands, the barbarian cavalry is also ready to flank from both wings and finally complete the encirclement, ready to use the circular array to shoot the bows and arrows in their hands. Liu Ben smiled when he saw that the barbarian cavalry was still using such tactics in the car formation. The distance of the barbarian cavalry shooting is 50 paces to start shooting, and the effective range of the musketeer is 80 to 90 paces, which can completely shoot before the barbarian cavalry shoots arrows. Because it is very difficult to cultivate archers, the infantry of the Yu Kingdom in the past had nothing to do with the barbarian cavalry formation. They would only be disturbed by the barbarian bows and arrows. At this time, the barbarian heavy cavalry would appear, and the next step was a massacre. Looking at the approaching barbarian cavalry, the first row of soldiers raised their flintlock guns. At this time, the barbarian cavalry that was overwhelming the earth rushed towards the 3 chariot formations on the plain like a black torrent. Just after the barbarian cavalry came into range, the colonel on the musketeer side gave the order to fire. Boom! A row of white smoke emerged from the muzzles of the first row of musketeers in the dense formation. Lead bullets fell on the barbarian cavalry like raindrops within 80 paces. The barbarian cavalry's huge target became the target of bullets immediately. The people turned on their backs, and the barbarian cavalry in the front row fell neatly like cutting straw, and the cavalry in the back couldn't dodge and were tripped over by the front horse and also fell to the ground. Chapter 334 The Fear of Being Dominated. P.S. 3 chapters today, 5 chapters tomorrow, and of course 6 chapters. I hope everyone can support me. Snail will work hard in the second half of the month and try to update it every day. Bang bang, a row of white smoke re-emerged, and the second of 3 shots began. The musketeers, after firing in the first row, did not retreat to the third row to reload, but retreated into the car formation through the chains between the Hus chariots. The charioteer of the Hussite chariot has a special soldier who is responsible for opening and closing the chain. The gunshots sounded, and another row of barbarian cavalry fell. At this time, the barbarian cavalry who rushed over had realized that they had entered the trap, but they could only continue to outflank from the flank, because once they stopped, they would be hit by the cavalry behind. What made them desperate was that when they turned to the side of the car formation, they were still facing a strange weapon like the King's Hao army, and row after row of barbarian cavalry fell at the same time. The sound of the artillery sounded on the battlefield. The black cannonballs bounced on the ground, hit the horse's leg. The horse's leg was broken, and it hit a person. Kyuha, who had won the ticket, was stunned. The King's Hao army's artillery was blocked by the soldiers, and he did not see any artillery in the car formation. He finally realized that he had been fooled in just an instant. More than 2,000 cavalrymen fell in front of the King's Hao army, and the remaining cavalry continued to detour, but after a burst of white smoke, these cavalry fell one after another. At this time, the King's Hao army, after shooting, the musketeers hid in the vehicle formation, and the vehicle soldiers quickly opened the chariot's car plate. The Hussite chariot is like a box, and the box cover is a defensive barrier in wartime. These covers, which were covered with iron plates, were lifted, and the entire vehicle array immediately turned into a 2-meter-high bastion. The cover was reserved for gun holes, and the charioteers with flintlock guns immediately followed the gun holes. Shoot outside. At this time, the barbarian cavalry had already rushed within 50 steps. When they wanted to shoot back with bows and arrows, they found in despair that the King's Hao soldiers in front had already hid in the car formation. Can make a crisp sound and then drop. What made them even more mad was the constant white smoke coming out of the holes in the cardboard, and the cavalry kept falling. And that's not what scares them the most, because every time they finish a round of shooting, King's Hao's chariot board will be pulled down, and then the King's Hao army who just hid inside will shoot again with that strange weapon, and suddenly the cavalry once again turned on their backs and fell in pieces. Liu Ben in the chariot looked at the current results with satisfaction. The barbarian cavalry lost more than 3,000 people, while the King's Hao army had almost no casualties. He looked at the chariot soldiers who not only erected the chariot's deck, but also lowered his lips with a smile. The boards on both sides of this chariot can be put down. In order to enhance the survival rate of this chariot, King Qi installed a layer of iron plates on all 4 sides of the chariot when fighting. The outer chariot boards are erected for defense, and the inner chariot boards are lowered to become slopes. Soldiers can board the chariots through the slopes and constantly exchange shots in the gap between the barbarians shooting arrows. The chariot soldiers can also put down the outer chariot board, so that the soldiers who hide in the inner side use three-stage shooting again to attack the barbarian cavalry who are galloping against the edge of the chariot. In this way, the car formation not only protected the musketeers, but also allowed the musketeers to continue firing under several rounds of shooting. The barbarian cavalry that rushed over fell one by one, and then the barbarian cavalry stopped attacking Devil. "This is the Devil's weapon," a barbarian cavalry screamed in horror, causing confusion among the cavalry. And the second group of cavalry ready to attack watched as the 3,000 cavalry continued to fall in the white smoke and flames, and they hardly caused any casualties to the King's Hao army. Fear began to spread in the hearts of the barbarian cavalry. At this moment, they suddenly recalled the terror of being dominated outside King's Hao city. The King's Hao army is invincible. In the chaos of Jizhao, more than 1,000 people have been lost, and now more than 3,000 people have been lost in the blink of an eye. The remaining cavalrymen showed fear one by one, and had no will to fight in this way. They will only die one by one, not a matter of courage, but because it is a desperate battle. Kill, rush to me, the enemy is in front of him, and the enemy is in front of him. Qiuhe is not reconciled. How can the invincible barbarian cavalry lose to the soldiers of the great Yu kingdom, and how can a wolf lose to the rabbit? Under the hysteria, Qiuhe roared, "Give me a charge! Slash the retreat!" No one listened to his orders, and the cavalry refused to charge again because in their eyes, the King's Hao army is now holding the weapons of the Devil, and these weapons will only bring them death. Rush! Rush! Rush for me! Qiuhe's eyes were red, and when the machete in his hand fell, a soldier was killed. The screams continued, but his orders were not carried out, and under his fury, the cavalry began to disperse in the chariot formation. Niu Ben observed Qiuhe's cavalry with a telescope. After seeing Qiuhe's move, he immediately seized the opportunity. The barbarians have lost their will to fight. Let the cavalry attack. Niu Ben ordered. Lu Fei was ordered to immediately rectify the cavalry in the chariot formation. In order to disintegrate the fighting spirit of the barbarians, Luo Xin fired the artillery more cheerfully, and shot the barbarian cavalry one by one. The King's Hao cavalry attacked, and the chariots immediately opened the chains, opening several gaps in the chariot formation, and the cavalry swarmed out from these gaps. Kill these bastards of the barbarian race and rush with loud 1,000 cuirassiers rushed out of the chariot formation and quickly turned into neat and tight formation while running. Lu Fei raised the saber in his hand, and the warhorse rushed towards the barbarian cavalry at the fastest speed. Qiuhe had traveled a long distance and was already exhausted. Under the unexpected attack of King's Hao with a flintlock gun, the soldiers were already scared to death at this time. Facing the charge of 3,000 neat and consistent cavalry, the barbarian cavalry finally collapsed completely, and they all fled along the official road. Under the panic, the formation of the barbarian cavalry was in chaos, and the warhorses were crowded with each other and could not escape in time, and the distance of 300 meters came in an instant when the horses were urged with all their strength. Only when they were 100 meters away, the cuirassiers picked up the pulley crossbow from the side of the horse. Because it was too hasty, the cuirassiers were not equipped with guns at all, so they could only temporarily pick up the pulley crossbow on either side of the warhorse hung two wound crossbows. When they reached the range, the cuirassiers immediately released their arrows, and the powerful crossbow arrows flew towards the panicked barbarian cavalry, causing a scream. Then Lu Fei picked up another pulley crossbow and fired another arrow 50 meters away. Throwing down the crossbow, Lu Fei raised his saber again. The 2 rounds of shooting caused heavy losses to the crowded barbarian cavalry, and the barbarian cavalry was even more chaotic at this moment. The cuirassiers holding the saber came in a blink of an eye. Under the golden sunlight, the saber shone with a cold metal texture. When Lu Fei swung down the saber, the head of a barbarian cavalry shot up into the sky, followed by splashes of blood. At this moment, 3,000 King's Hao cavalrymen plunged into the barbarian array like sharp swords, screaming through the sky. King's Hao cavalry reaping life like the scythe of death. At this time, the barbarian cavalry only cares about running for their lives. At this moment, the King's Hao cavalry has become a hungry wolf, and the barbarian cavalry is just a panicked rabbit. Chapter 335 Advance, go ahead. Qiuhe's eyes were filled with blood red, and his ears were filled with the screams of his subordinates. He lost. The defeat was so complete. At this moment he realized the despair of the great Yu Kingdom's army when they were surrounded by them. Compared with his fear, he was even more shocked. He was shocked by what kind of weapon that sprayed flames and smoked white smoke. What was this strange formation of vehicles? Tissue paper is generally torn easily. It's just that they can't continue to think more. The King's Hao cavalry wearing silver breastplates is about to complete the encirclement on both sides, die or escape. At this moment, He chose to run away. When a jackal faces death, fear follows like other cavalrymen. Qiuhe chose to flee. He raised a machete in his hand, and any soldier who blocked his escape was killed by him. Lu Fei quickly noticed Qiuhe, who kept waving the machete among the cavalry, trying to rush out. His eyes narrowed dangerously. He recalled the tragic situation outside Kingzhou 3 years ago. When he led the soldiers to Kangzhou, there were corpses of common people along the road. The barbarian soldiers did not spare even the babies. Somewhere along the way, babies can be seen impaled on the tip of a spear. The scene made him mad with anger. Wherever the barbarians go, it is like a hell on earth. In their eyes, the people of the Great Yu Kingdom are not human at all, but animals that are even lower than cattle and sheep. Therefore, they slaughtered the people of the Daiyu country without any sympathy. He still remembered that the craziest barbarian cavalry even arrested the people of the Daiyu country to cook and eat when the food and grass were scarce to Lu Fei. These barbarians were not humans at all, but a group of beasts from the north. They are as cunning as foxes and vicious as vipers. There is no benevolence and morality in their world, only cruelty and slavery. At this time, he suddenly remembered what King Qi said: once the barbarians come to dominate the Central Plains, the Han people will be reduced to prisoners under the class, and will be reduced to despicable slaves forever, and the broad civilization of the Central Plains will be stagnant. This kind of fault is like the Zhongguo before the Daguo 500 years ago. It was at that time that the grassland people entered the Central Plains and caused endless disasters to the Han civilization. Raising the saber in his hand, Lu Fei led the cavalry directly to where Qiuhe was. In his eyes is the anger of a nation in the face of the invasion of foreign nations, and the flames of revenge for the dead compatriots. He had been desperate before, because the corruption and incompetence of the Great Yu Kingdom would no longer be able to protect his own people, but now this despair has been replaced by a hope for King Qi, for our hometown, for the parents behind us. Kill! Lu Fei shouted hoarsely. Kill! The fierce voices of the soldiers penetrated the battlefield. In the eyes of the barbarian cavalry, a group of murderous Kingzhou cavalry rushed towards them like lightning. Then the picture in their eyes just stayed on the saber raised by the Kingzhou soldiers. The Kingzhou cavalry on both sides of the roundabout rushed towards the barbarian cavalry, squeezed together. At the moment when the encirclement was completed, the sound of killing rang out, and the Kingzhou soldiers raised their saber angrily. At this time, the barbarian cavalry was crowded and crushed each other. Panicking and unable to organize an effective resistance, the battle was doomed. From the moment the cavalry broke up, Lu Fei's cavalry rushed into the barbarian cavalry first, waving the saber left and right, and suddenly screamed when the barbarians saw such a vicious figure rushing to the left and right to kill. They were even more confused. Moreover, now that they were close to each other, they did not have much advantage and were quickly divided by the Kingzhou cavalry. After killing 10 barbarian cavalry in a row, Qiuhe appeared in front of Lu Fei. Dog thief! Your grandfather Lu Fei is here too. After all, Lu Fei rushed over, seeing that he was surrounded by Kingzhou cavalry. Qiuhe was also wicked and courageous, and urged the horse to rush towards Lu Fei as well. The scimitar in his hand and Lu Fei's saber collided in the air, sparking everywhere. Qiuhe is also a member of the Blood Wolf tribe, and the two fought to tie this round, turning the horse's head. The two fought together again on the other side of the official road. Niu Ben was observing the battle at this time. The barbarians fell into chaos. Most of the barbarian cavalry had been defeated and fled, and the rest had been surrounded by cavalry led by Lu Fei. At this time he waved his hand, and suddenly a fierce charge horn sounded. Hearing the sound of the trumpet, the musketeers immediately tilted their bayonets and charged towards the barbarian cavalry. Kill! The roar came from the mouths of the musketeers, and the Kingzhou army soldiers rushed towards the barbarian cavalry. Seeing this, the barbarian cavalry disintegrated faster, and more barbarian cavalry lost their will to fight and fled on horses. The musketeers with bayonets arrived in an instant, when they reformed the battle formation, and the bayonets slanted out. Intensive bayonet attack. The barbarian cavalry on the warhorse was directly stabbed into a hornet's nest, and the barbarian cavalry fell in rows. After an hour of fierce fighting, the surrounded barbarian cavalry were all annihilated. Lu Fei and Qiuhe are still fighting with each other. Qiuhe stopped at this moment. He looked at the surrounding Kingzhou soldiers, and laughed wildly. You Han dogs, Bei Shantaiji will avenge me, and he will definitely kill all of you in the Great Yu Kingdom. The men of yours will snatch all your women and become our slaves, and the iron cavalry of the Golden Horde will smash Kingzhou and leave you alone. He was cursing frantically when he suddenly saw a general riding a war horse, rushing towards him with a saber in his hand. Seeing this man, Qiuhe's eyes were immediately bloodshot, and he clenched a machete in his hand and rushed towards the man. Lu Fei turned his head and saw Niu Ben rushing towards Qiuhe one by one, but he stopped when he wanted to rush over. At this moment, Niuben's warhorse and Kuha's warhorse passed by, the sword light flashed, and a head flew into the sky. With just one blow, Niuben cut off Kuha's head. Lu Fei felt a chill in his heart. Niuben was born with great strength, and he was really strong in martial arts. When the King's Hao soldiers saw this scene, they suddenly shouted for peace. The governor is mighty, the governor is mighty. Niuben's face turned serious. He used the saber to pick up Kuha's head, and roared loudly, "Soldier, we won. The barbarians are not invincible. These years, the barbarians owe us too much blood debt. Now we want to get it back. Get it back. Get it back." The soldiers shouted angrily. Niuben nodded and threw Kuha's head on the ground. At this moment, his eyes were slightly moist. Once, he had seen too many generals of the Great Yu country having their heads cut off, just like he was being killed by barbarians. Raise the insults, and now, they're going to fight back. Chapter 336 Hot Air Balloon Attack. In King's Hao, the battle report in front was continuously passed on to the Qi Wangfu through the post station on the official road. The barbarian Captain Q had died in battle, and the news of the collapse of the 10,000 team reached the governor's mansion in just one day. Niuben asked the post to send the battle report to King's Hao overnight. Okay. Niuben fought a beautiful field annihilation battle outside Yun's Hao city. According to him, the loss was almost negligible, and it was a real victory in the governor mansion. Xiao Ming handed the battle report to Zan Xingcheng, carefully scrutinizing the news on the battle report. Zan Xingcheng said with a smile while stroking his beard, "The combination of the flintlock gun and this formation seems to allow the King's Hao army to fight the barbarians in the wild. If so, the King's Hao army will also through this formation, we can fight against the main force of Chagatai." Niuben said in the battle report that he was going to go to Jizhao after a few days of repairs. The mixed application of the hollow phalanx and the Kara ray made him a lot more courageous. Xiao Ming said, "His Royal Highness, the lower official feels that there is no need to let General Niuben go to Jizhao immediately. Chagatai's troops still have the advantage, and once they leave Jizhao, our logistics will be stretched. At this time, Jizhao is full of chaotic people. The threat is very great. If the barbarians and/or the rioters cut off the transportation line, our soldiers will be in danger. This time to help Jizhao is true, but it is also true to preserve our strength." Xiao Ming nodded. The soldiers of the King's Hao army were not afraid of fighting, but they were afraid that the food would be cut off if Chagatai surrounded the King's Hao army and did not attack. The army would face a desperate situation within 10 days. "Then what do you think?" Xiao Ming asked Zan Xingcheng. He was still the master of the ancient tricks, waiting for the Imperial Army and King Wei's army to act together. "Let King Wei's army protect our food and grass. This time King Wei must be just the same as last time, just go through the motions. Let them go to the front. They naturally refuse, but if they are asked to protect the transportation line, they will naturally not push it away." Zan Xingcheng analyzed. Pang Yukin, who was on the side, also said, "Zan Xingcheng is right. The army sent by King Wei this time is the Mountain Battalion. Who does not know that this is the worst army of King Wei? So, this time Jizhao is trapped, and this king can only rely on the Forbidden Army." Xiao Ming had a headache at the same time. There was some anger in his heart. So intriguing. How could a Yu kingdom, which is pulling each other's legs, defend against the barbarians? "I'm afraid that's the case," Zan Xingcheng said, "and Chagatai is only a forward. If Beishan comes again at this time, the King's Hao army will be in trouble this time." Hearing this, Xiao Ming sighed. This time Niuben brought out basically all his elites. He didn't want to destroy all his soldiers. Just as Zan Xingcheng said, he wanted to help Jizhao, but he had to save it. You can't be a gunman for others. The old traitor is as cunning as the King of Wei. However, in Xiao Ming's opinion, it may not be a bad thing to let the King's Hao army hone. The battlefield is changing rapidly, and this expedition may be able to train more generals for him. The three agreed. And Xiao Ming drew up an order for Niuben to wait for King Wei's army, and then go to Jizhao together to relieve Jizhao. At the same time, he once again ordered to guide the victims into King's Hao. He feels more and more that the population is the combat power, and the population is the productivity. Otherwise, the population of the fief today is simply not enough to support the consumption of the war. This is the sadness of a country with a small population facing a country with a large population. When the difference in weapon generation is not very large, the use of human sea tactics is enough to destroy the opponent. And now the population of their own fief is not much, only a quarter of that of the barbarians, and this does not include the slaves of the barbarians. The difference in comprehensive strength is too great. which is why he wants to frantically grab the population. These people also lived a miserable life under the rule of King Yuang, unable to take advantage of their population, and it would be different when they came to his fifth. Not only can it provide reserves for its own army, but it can also provide labor for all walks of life in King Zhao. In this way, he can have the capital and the barbarians to consume for a long time, until the barbarians are dragged down by war. As I was writing, a loud noise suddenly came to my mind outside the governor's mansion. A guard suddenly ran in and hurriedly said, "Your Highness, something strange has appeared in the sky heaven." Xiao Ming was stunned when he heard the words, but suddenly he laughed and said to Pang Yuqian and Zhang Xingcheng, "Let's go and have a look." Pang Yuqian and Zhang Xingcheng both showed expressions of interest. The three go out. I saw the people on the street stopped one after another, pointed their fingers to the sky, and kept whispering. At this time in the sky, a large gray balloon was slowly moving, and the balloon was about 50 meters away from the ground. But the 10-meter diameter of the hot air balloon makes the hot air balloon look huge, and the hot air balloon can be seen moving anywhere in King Zhao. "His Royal Highness, what is this?" Zhang Xingcheng was shocked. The officials of the Great Yu Kingdom were still very feudal and superstitious, and at this time they couldn't help but associate hot air balloons with gods and ghosts. I saw Pang Yuqian and Zhang Xingcheng pale, and some people on the street are even praying to the sky with their hands clasped together. "What are you nervous about? This is a hot air balloon, something made by the students of Bowen College," Xiao Ming explained. At the same time, he looked up at the hot air balloon in the sky, and saw that there was no one on the hot air balloon, only a brazier was burning, and the rope tied to the hot air balloon was still low. He realized something. Maybe the hot air balloon broke free from the rope and flew away during the experiment. Sure enough, his idea came true, and Lin Wentao quickly appeared on the street. He was running and jumping, trying to grab the rope on the hot air balloon. The students from the School of Physics also followed behind Lin Wentao, shouting, "Get down, get down, this idiot will kill people." Xiao Ming was extremely depressed during this time. He had learned about Lin Wentao's hot air balloon. Lin Wentao used tune oil as the fuel for the hot air balloon. Tune oil can not only paint wood to prevent corrosion, but it is also the fuel for oil lamps. In many modern rural areas, there are still many people who use tune oil lamps. After studying the original hot air balloon in the textbook, Lin Wentao apparently made a modification to the hot air balloon. After all, the most primitive hot air balloons use burning materials such as straw to heat the gas in the hot air balloon. This kind of hot air balloon floats in the air for only about 20 minutes, and the distance it flies out is only about 20 miles away. Now Lin Wentao takes the method of hitting tune oil under the hot air balloon to make the hot air balloon fly farther. However, the combustion value of tune oil is not as good as that of later propane gas, so the tune oil he added can at most make the voyage of the hot air balloon about 5 times. No way. When natural gas and propane were not made, the limitations of hot air balloons were here. Chapter 337. Hot air balloons are still floating over King Zhao. Lin Wentao and the others were chasing after them, and when they were tired and out of breath, the sound of horse hooves suddenly come up. Xiao Ming rode his horse to Lin Wentao. Lin Wentao was stunned, suddenly at a loss. "What are you still doing? If the hot air balloon disappears, this king will not make another one for you." Xiao Ming glared at him and said. Lin Wentao immediately became anxious when he heard the words, and immediately climbed onto Xiaolong's horse. Looking at the hot air balloon, Xiao Ming and Lin Wentao chased out, followed by Xiaolong and Zhao Hu. The hot air balloon kept flying westward, and the rope under the hot air balloon fell down, making Xiao Ming happy that at least this time Lin Wentao made the rope longer. Maybe this guy flew the hot air balloon like a kite. Following the hot air balloon, everyone quickly chased out of the city, and the hot air balloon flew lower and lower outside the city of King Zhao. Immediately, Lin Wentao and Xiao Ming said that there was only a small amount of tune oil on the hot air balloon. They just heated it below, and flew away without thinking about the hot air balloon. Seeing the hot air balloon flying lower and lower, Xiao Ming immediately breathed a sigh of relief. If tune oil was added, he didn't know where the hot air balloon would fly, and this hot air balloon can easily hurt people when it falls from the sky. Now that the farmland outside the city has landed, Xiao Ming is relieved. "Your Highness, catch it." The hot air balloon could no longer fly. Lin Wentao jumped off his horse and ran over to grab the rope of the hot air balloon. Xiao Ming nodded. "Now you know how hot air balloons fly." Lin Wentao nodded solemnly. "This hot air balloon flies according to the direction of the wind. If we take a hot air balloon, we can only follow the direction of the wind. Well, it's good to understand this. Although you have made a hot air balloon now, this is only the most basic hot air balloon. The real practical hot air balloon needs to continue to be explored. This king hopes that one day you can put the hot air balloon into practical use, What Xiaoming said was basically his approval of Lin Wentao. Now the hot air balloon is only the first step, he continued. The ability of hot air balloons to fly is only the most basic. The next problem you have to study is how to make people ride in hot air balloons and find different wind directions in the air to control the flight of hot air balloons. The direction of the wind is different at different altitudes in the air. The hot air balloon can only fly according to the direction of the wind, and the speed is the same as the wind speed. This knowledge is available in the textbooks written by Xiaoming. Lin Wentao nodded. He also knew that he had only achieved the first step. He said, "Your Highness, after a while, I will definitely take a hot air balloon and circle Qingzhou City. This king is looking forward to such a day. As a result, this hot air balloon is a landscape of Qingzhou." Xiaoming laughed. For Xiaoming, he very much hopes that the hot air balloon can function as a bomber, but unfortunately it cannot be done at the current level of the hot air balloon. First of all, the current hot air balloon is not a hydrogen balloon, the flying height is not high, and the flexibility is too poor because it is driven by the wind. It is impossible for the hot air balloon to hover in a certain place, and it can only follow the wind hard if you do throw things down unless there is a suitable wind direction to blow the hot air balloon into the enemy's camp. Secondly, you have to throw it accurately. After all, once the place is over, the hot air balloon may need a long distance to find the right wind direction to return, not to mention that there are not many people on a hot air balloon. Therefore, compared to the extremely inefficient sneak attack on the enemy, Xiaoming still focused on high-altitude reconnaissance, tourism and sightseeing in Qingzhou City, and another one is advertising. Just imagine how many people's attention will be attracted if a large advertisement is hung on the hot air balloon. Xiaoming can already think of businessmen competing to put advertisements on hot air balloons. The last function of the hot air balloon is to deliver news and rescue key people when the city is under siege. Of course, he does not hope that this method will be used one day. In any case, he appreciates Lin Wentao's courage to try a hot air balloon. Just waiting to take the flight will take a while. Let Zhao Long and Zhao Hu cooperate with Lin Wentao to put away the hot air balloon. After a while, the students from the School of Physics also arrived. After they saluted Xiaoming, they stepped forward to help Lin Wentao put away the hot air balloon. Xiaoming looked at the busy students with satisfaction. He finally saw a change in them, and this shift will only become more pronounced when the students here were busy. Qingzhou City was already in a frenzy, and the people who came and went, and the merchants who came in and out all rushed to the city gate. There were more and more people around the hot air balloon, and soon the area where the hot air balloon landed was surrounded, each with a strong curiosity on his face. Looking at the crowd of people watching, Xiaoming's heart moved. He might be able to use this hot air balloon time to popularize scientific knowledge among the people, which is also an enlightenment of the people's wisdom. In the crowd, Xiaoming also saw Xiao's Hangyang. He was looking at the busy students with a look of astonishment. His mouth could not be closed. Since ancient times, people have been in awe of the sky. Flying is an unreachable dream. It is conceivable that the hot air balloon floating through space will shock them. For foreign businessmen, the hot air balloon made them feel that Qingzhou became more mysterious, and King Qi became more and more unpredictable. From their hearts, they gradually became full of awe in Qingzhou. King Qi can even fly to the sky, and there is nothing else he can't do. While the local businessmen were amazed, they looked at the faces of foreign businessmen full of pride, as if to say, "Look, this is our Qingzhou. See who of you dares to say that our Qingzhou is shabby." Seeing that there were more and more people surrounding him, the soldiers guarding the city suddenly rushed over. They sent some people to surround Xiaoming in the middle, while the other part dispersed the people. Now the situation in Qingzhou is complicated. Xiaoming's safety is the most sensitive string in everyone's mind. After Lin Wentao had sorted out the hot air balloon and let the carriage pull it back, Xiaoming returned to the city. Speaking of which, he was also seeing a hot air balloon for the first time. Although he was very clear about the structure of the hot air balloon, it was the first time he saw the real thing, so he was full of curiosity. On the way back, Xiaoming and Lin Wentao kept chatting. Lin Wentao initially talked about the next step to realize the hot air balloon for people, while Xiaoming talked about letting the hot air balloon carry out high-altitude reconnaissance, and also talked about the role of other hot air balloons. When Yuki said that he could still use hot air balloons to make money, Lin Wentao became more and more excited, because he felt that the hot air balloons he made were at least not something to be seen and used. And the money was not in vain. And Xiaoming also promised him that if the hot air balloon can bring income, he will put all the money into Bowen College. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338. After the hot air balloon floated over Qingzhou City, a heated discussion about what it was quickly erupted in the city. However, the next day's newspaper completely let the people understand what this is, and the term hot air balloon has also become a popular and fashionable term in Qingzhou. What is this hot air balloon? Asked an out-of-town businessman who had just entered the city. This hot air balloon is something that flies in the sky, probably like a ball. A native of Qingzhou answered proudly, a flying ball? The foreign businessman was puzzled. Of course, even pigs can fly in Qingzhou. Our Qingzhou is a place where anything can happen. This is what the newspaper said. Qingzhou people carried strong self-confidence. The businessman smiled awkwardly. From his point of view, everyone in Qingzhou was sick, and he was not too sick. He'd heard people discussing this question many times along the way, but everyone's response was different, which made him more and more confused. Just when he was puzzled, he saw a group of people suddenly exclaimed and looked up at the sky. At the same time he followed and looked over, and his jaw dropped in shock. I saw a huge sphere slowly floating in the sky. A huge banner was attached to the hot air balloon, and 3 vertical banners were also hung on the hanging basket. Below the banner reads, Qingzhou Chamber of Commerce sells mirrors, perfumes, drunk Qingzhou liquor, if you want to buy it quickly. The address of the Chamber of Commerce. The huge hot air balloon did not fly high and was very conspicuous. The moment they saw the hot air balloon, they also saw the advertisement on the hot air balloon. The non-local businessman was stunned. He came here because of his reputation. Could it be that this is Qingzhou, where businessmen are flocking? It really is an extraordinary place. The people of Qingzhou were also stunned. They didn't expect that hot air balloons could still be used like this. Those businessmen who were originally living in Qingzhou were all human beings, and they understood something in an instant. In the next few days, the people of Qingzhou gradually became familiar with the hot air balloons floating in the sky. Every time the hot air balloon floats by, even the children in the city will run with the hot air balloon, which is very happy. At the same time, all kinds of eyeliners in Qingzhou City also spread the strange news of hot air balloons back, and at the same time they are collecting news about all aspects of hot air balloons. However, these matters are handled by Li Sen, while Xiaoming is busy dealing with businessmen. After all, he is still named as the president of the Qingzhou Chamber of Commerce. His Royal Highness, this hot air balloon is really amazing. I wonder if your highness can also put the name of the CAO Family Bank on it and write down the business of the CAO Family Bank. It was the first time that CAO Zheng Guiyang found Qi Wangfu. He first went to the Chamber of Commerce, and after learning that the Chamber of Commerce had no right to intervene, he immediately came to the Qi Wangfu to visit Xiaoming. Li Keihun didn't understand about the advertisement, so Xiaoming naturally didn't feel relieved to hand it over to him this time. The advertisement on the hot air balloon was naturally what Xiaoming ordered Lin Wentao to do. It is very difficult to promote their own shops in the era of closed information. Especially many businessmen have opened their workshops outside Qingzhou City after Xiaoming changed hands with soap technology. There were no less than 50 soap shops outside Qingzhou City. All of these 50 companies want to sell more of their soap, and the effect of advertising will be important at this time. Whoever seizes the first opportunity will gain the initiative and will get more profits. In business affairs, Xiaoming naturally wanted to raise the price. He said hesitantly, one hot air balloon flight costs a lot. This, CAO Zheng Guiyang was already prepared. He said, His Royal Highness, even if you say it straight, CAO will naturally not let His Highness spend money in this case. This king said that the thing hanging on the hot air balloon is called an advertisement. As the name suggests, it is widely advertised. Now that you need this advertisement, the cost of this advertisement is also very different. Please speak. Your Highness, Xiaoming continued, you must have seen that there are many banners hanging on this hot air balloon, and the positions of the banners are different, so the problem comes, the position of each banner is different, and the price is also different. The size of the banner is different, and the price is also different, so where do you need the banner and how big is the banner? CAO Zheng Guiyang recalled that the banners on the hot air balloons were really of different sizes and positions. He smiled and said, His Royal Highness, why is it so troublesome? If CAO Mu is all-inclusive, it will be done. Xiaoming sneered in his heart, thinking that you brought it to the door yourself. With a hot air balloon with a diameter of 10 meters and the position of the hanging basket, there are as many as 30 advertising spots for a hot air balloon at one time, he said. In fact, there are not many. The hot air balloon will travel around the city once every 10 days, 3 times a month. You must know that as long as the hot air balloon appears, It will attract the attention of the people and businessmen. CAO Zheng Guiyang nodded. So, if you contract it all, 3 times a month, you have to pay 50,000 taels of silver. CAO Zheng Guiyang almost said, "You stole money." When he reacted, he immediately fell into silence. Xiao Ming knew this would be the case. He analyzed it and said, "There are 30 advertising spaces on each hot air balloon, 3 times a month, which is equivalent to about 600 taels per advertising space once. It's not expensive, and the worst advertising space is about 300 taels 3 times a month." CAO Zheng Guiyang nodded. "It's really not expensive to pay back the advertising space. It's just that Haikao has already boasted, and the CAO family bank is about to open." He gritted his teeth and said, "Your Highness, 50,000 is 50,000. This is the silver note of our CAO family bank. You can go to the bank to exchange silver at any time with money." Xiao Ming took the silver note handed over by CAO Zheng Guiyang and felt relieved at the same time. He felt deeply that the CAO family had strong financial resources. This banknote is basically equivalent to modern paper money, and the CAO family was able to let merchants generally use the CAO family's banknotes in the Great Yu Kingdom, which shows the strong strength of the CAO family bank. But he is not worried. It will not take long for him to issue his own currency, but before issuing currency, he must reserve a large amount of gold and silver, and this gold and silver must be obtained through foreign trade and plunder. In his mind, he clearly remembered the locations of gold and silver mines in various places, but in order to obtain these deposits, he must first defeat the local Western colonists. After sending CAO Zheng Guiyang away, Xiao Ming met with other businessmen and introduced them to such widely advertised advertisements. The businessmen generally received the advertisements very quickly. However, CAO Zheng Guiyang was rich and powerful, and contracted for 3 months of advertising. Busy until the afternoon, the businessmen who came to visit left one after another. At this time, Xiao Ming took the money and went to Bowen College. He fulfilled his promise, and all the advertising revenue will be used for the education of Bowen College, whether it is the purchase of experimental materials, the improvement of the students' living standards, or the purchase of special school uniforms for the students. Chapter 339, Mountain Camp. Your Highness, is this really for the School of Physics, in Bowen College? Lin Wentao said excitedly. The students of the School of Physics looked at the 50,000 taels of silver notes in Xiao Ming's hand, and their faces flushed with excitement. In the past, they were all poor scholars. How could they have seen so much money? Just 50,000 taels. Xiao Ming nodded. This is what this king promised you, and of course it is for you, but there is one thing. This money is for the public expenses of the School of Physics, not for personal gain. This money will be paid by the Academic Affairs Office of the college manages it, and every expenditure will also be reported to the government office. Lin Wentao nodded, which meant that in addition to the fee provided by the government office, they also had a special expense. With this fee, they could buy the experimental supplies they personally needed. His Royal Highness, we will use the money carefully. Lin Wentao smiled. The last time he was kicked out of the textile mill was because of the lack of money. Now that they have money, they can do whatever experiments they want to experiment. You don't need to go through the layers of declarations, you can collect the money yourself. Xiao Ming nodded. He handed the silver to the Academic Affairs Office of the Academy, and explained the use of the silver. In addition to Xiao Ming serving as the Dean of Bowen College, there are also several senior scholars in the college who are responsible for teaching Chinese characters. In addition, they are also responsible for some affairs in the college. This is the Academic Affairs Office of the college. Otherwise, there will be troubles in such a large Bowen College without anyone watching it every day. After putting the silver into the college's warehouse, Xiao Ming inspected the Bowen College. Unlike before, the current Bowen College has a strong learning atmosphere, and students can often be seen holding textbooks and discussing together. This scene made him very gratified. Everything was difficult at the beginning, and he believed that as time went on, Bowen College would become more and more formalized. After dealing with Lin Wentao's affairs, Xiao Ming left the academy and went straight to the governor's mansion. Now that the war is at a stalemate, he needs to sit in the governor's mansion to issue orders at any time. According to the news, Yunzhao, an army slowly entered the city of Yunzhao. What kind of army is this? In the marching team were old men in their 50s, teenagers under 15, and some people who looked very treacherous, like criminals walking on the streets of Yunzhao City. This army seems to be ready to fight at any time. It seems to be ready to escape at any time, and at the same time it is ready to loot. When the people of Yunzhao City passed by, they would always be shocked. Compared with the strict discipline of the King's Hao army, this was simply a temporary peace. In fact, This is indeed the 30,000 horses put together by King Wei Lin. Among them are generally old and weak soldiers laid off in the army, some are recruits who have just had symptoms and have not received training, and some are death row prisoners in cells. This is King Wei's army. Can such an army protect our logistics line? Lu Fei spat fiercely at the scattered army of King Wei. Niu Ben sighed deeply. And King Qi ordered them to wait for King Wei's army to rush to Jizhao together in order to protect the transportation line. But in his opinion, an army like this is more dangerous than the rioters, because in his opinion these people will mutiny at any time. His Royal Highness must never have imagined that this mountain camp would be so bad. Luo Xin said with his arms crossed. He is no stranger to this kind of army in the Great Yu Kingdom. The problem of empty pay for the army is very serious, and the same is true for the fiefs of the vassal kings. So sometimes an army seems to be there, but it is not. Once these heads are needed during the war, the army will temporarily pull up the strong men to fill them up. Such an army has no fighting power at all, and once a war is fought, it will quickly disintegrate. In the past, he was still able to accept it, because each general was more or less, but since he came to King Zhao, he has gradually been unable to accept this kind of army that eats empty wages, because in King Zhao, no generals dared to take empty pay. Niu Ben was extremely strict in governing the army, and the most important thing was that he was deeply trusted by the King of Qi. There were several generals in King Zhao who were empty pay. After they were discovered, these generals were personally executed by Niu Ben. The head is still hanging on the head of Kangzhou City like the Qin family and other traitors, and Xiaoming was even more furious when he heard the news, and ordered the 6 states to thoroughly investigate the generals who took empty pay, and all generals involved in empty pay were executed without exception. The army of the 6 states was cleared for a while, and no one dared to cross the Thunder Pool. However, it can also be seen that the style of the local army in the Great Yu country has a great influence, and this influence has not affected the Kingzhou army, because the Kingzhou army was the direct line of the King of Qi, under the personal control. It was strictly disciplined, but the army of the other 5 states still suffered from the decaying disease of the Great Yu Kingdom. Seeing King Wei's army now, Luo Xin instantly understood what kind of army it was, an army that had been eaten up, and a group of soldiers who had been improvised. A bunch of rabble in the flowery world in the south of the Yangtze River. Luoji Huaxiang has made many troops forget what war is. There's nothing we can do. General Luo Quan has already sent a number of people to urge us to go to Jizhao City. The Forbidden Army is already on the way. We have to encircle Chagatai on both sides. One day, we will set off for Jizhao tomorrow. We can't wait any longer. Before Bishan arrives, we must lift the siege of Jizhao, otherwise the barbarians will attack King Zhao's outpost. Lu Fei nodded and turned to leave. At the front of the line were a group of generals from King Wei's army. He stepped forward to stop them and said, "Everyone, the next one is Lu Fei, the commander of the King Zhao Military Academy. The governor of my family invites you to go out to Jizhao with the King Zhao army tomorrow morning. Don't delay your trip." The general at the front of the team had a pair of mouse-like eyes. He glanced at Lu Fei lightly, and said disdainfully, "A little colonel dares to stand in front of our horse. Get out and let your governor come to see you." The contemptuous attitude of the Shanxiang general made Lu Fei angry for a while. The army had already made him very angry, and now this general is so arrogant. He said angrily, "You also deserve to see my governor?" Bah! The general of Shanxiang was furious when he heard the words. The captain of the little King Zhao army is actually acting arrogant in front of my army of King Wei. It's so cowardly. Come here, take him down for me, teach him a hard lesson, and let him understand that it is the King of Wei, or the King of Qi. Immediately, the general's personal guard got off the horse and rushed directly to Lu Fei. At this time, the resting King Zhao army felt something was wrong. They stood up from each resting place and walked behind Lu Fei. Chapter 340. It's summer, and the hot sun is baking Yunzhao City, but this time, the people on the road felt a chill. There are more and more King Zhao army soldiers resting on both sides of the road, eyeing the generals of the Shanxi battalion. They fought bloody battles in front, resisted the barbarians, and won a peaceful and prosperous world for these people. What qualifications do they have to shout about? What do you want to do? Rebellion? He Kui was the commander of the Shanxi battalion, and his expression changed instantly. The guards who rushed over also stopped. They felt a dangerous aura from these soldiers. This is an aura that only those who have experienced life and death on the battlefield have. If it was before, Lu Fei would have brought people up to beat the birdmen, but now he must focus on the overall situation. Although the battle outside Yunzhao City defeated a barbarian army of 10,000 people, It was all because the barbarians did not take precautions in advance, and the siege of Jizhao still required the cooperation of the three armies. He said slowly, "The barbarian army is in Jizhao. Lu doesn't want to have a quarrel with the friendly army, but he also asks the general to respect himself. This time the three armies are working together to relieve the siege of Jizhao." Presumably, the general did not come to King Zhao. Military affairs after all. Lu Fei retreated to the side of the road looking at the strange King Zhao army. He snorted softly and led the soldiers into the camp to station. He came to help Jizhao this time with a stomach full of resentment. No one in King Wei's army was willing to take on this unfortunate job. Along the way, he would tremble every time he thought of fighting the barbarians, whose terror penetrated into the hearts of their generals. What's more, the King of Wei handed him an army like this, and it was because he was angry that he spoke rudely to Lu Fei. It was really to vent the bad anger in his heart. For a while Lu Fei informed Shan Xiang of tomorrow's itinerary and went back to Daying to organize a trip to Jizhao tomorrow. These days, King Zhao has dispatched some artillerymen, and this time the number of artillery pieces in the army has reached 50 in the military camp. Lu Fei and Niu Ben complained about Shanzi camp again. Niu Ben just smiled bitterly. In this situation, he can only break the jar and smash it. It will be fine when he joins up with the Imperial Army. After all, he and Luo Quan knew each other well, and knew that this forbidden army was at least worth a fight. On the second day, Niu Ben set out with the King Zhao army. In the formation of this march, Lu Fei arranged the musketeers in the middle. On both sides are chariots and cavalry in columns, so that if they encounter a sudden attack by barbarians, they can immediately form a chariot defense. At this time, the Shanzi battalion was walking behind the King Zhao army. Just as he thought, the Shanzi battalion took the initiative to undertake the transportation of the logistics. Although Niu Ben did not believe in the combat power of the Shanzi battalion, this time something was better than nothing. What's more, the King Zhao army is in the lineup, and if there is an accident, they can support at any time except for the boundary of Yunzhao City. After walking for less than 30 miles, the scene on both sides of the road became bleak. Displaced victims began to appear along the road. These disaster victims looked sad and dragged their families to Yunzhao City. "Old man, are you going to King Qi's fief?" Niu Ben asked. A thin old man raised his head. "Yeah, I can't live in Jizhao anymore. We met a group of cavalry a few days ago. They said it was King Qi's army, and asked them to go to Yunzhao City, saying that Yunzhao City had food. Let them take refuge in King Qi's fief, and our entire village is ready to go. We are also King Qi's army, so don't worry. Yunzhao City has taken in many victims." Niu Ben did not forget another task of this trip. The victims heard the words with joy in their eyes, and they began to be full of hope for the road ahead. With a smile on his lips, Niu Ben continued to advance with the King Zhao army. He dispatched Qi Guanggai to gather the victims first, which seems to have been effective. Along the way, at least 30,000 or 40,000 victims went to Jizhao. The severe drought in Jizhao really made the local people suffer, and King Yuang's ineffective disaster relief caused him to lose the local people's heart more and more. Outside the city of Jizhao, more than 2,000 barbarian soldiers were bound and kneeling facing the north. Behind them also stood more than 2,000 barbarian soldiers, holding machetes in their hands, waiting for Chagate's order. Jizhao City has been besieged for more than half a month, and Chagate has always been besieged but not attacked. The army of King Yuang who came to help was constantly annihilated, and later, no army dared to come to support. And just when Chagate was on the verge of winning, and just waiting for Bishan's army to arrive, news of the collapse of the Quhuang Corps came, and at the same time 2,000 returning cavalrymen were detained by Chagate. The coach abandons the soldiers and kills them. The soldiers abandon the commander. Behead. Those who disobey the military order and retreat without permission will be executed. 2 ruthless Golden Horde military laws came out of Chagate's mouth. The cavalrymen kneeling on the ground looked numb, and when they chose to retreat, they knew that they would die at that time. They were really frightened by the strange weapons of the King Zhao army, which led to the unprecedented defeat of the Golden Horde since its founding. At this moment, they became a disgrace to the Golden Horde, and their families would live in ridicule. The Golden Horde established a country with a bow and horse, and attached great importance to honor. And this concept of honor was engraved in the hearts of everyone in the Golden Horde. Without waiting for Chagate's order, 1,000 commander who was kneeling on the ground stood up. He straightened his chest and said to Chagate, "Head of the flag, we are the disgrace of the Golden Horde. Please give us a chance to wash our own hands. The dirt on our body, we are willing to rush first, shed the last drop of blood for the Golden Horde, rather than die by the sword of our own people." When these cavalrymen broke up and returned, Chagate was furious. and no soldier in the Golden Horde could come back alive after losing the commander-in-chief. This is the iron law of the Golden Horde. It is with this harsh military law that the Golden Horde can conquer the entire northern country with a rattling sound. Chagatai suppressed the anger in his heart after the cavalry came back. They told about the strange formations and weapons in King Zhao. In his opinion, his soldiers were not afraid of death, but were afraid of such flaming weapons. The devil's weapon. Chagatai was talking to himself, and the shaman's warning suddenly echoed in his ears. Those killed by the devil will not be able to ascend to Chang Henshin, and the souls of those who died in battle for the honor of the tribe will be immortalized in Chang Henshin. Therefore, the soldiers of the Golden Horde were not afraid of death, but they were afraid of the legendary devil. In his opinion, it was the panic that touched the fear in the soldiers' hearts that led to this defeat. But whatever the reason, these soldiers must be executed. However, he is not a pedantic person. It is better to let these 2,000 people die on the way of a charge than to die in front of him. That kind of weapon is similar to a cannon, not a devil's weapon. You cowards, I will give you one more chance to prove to me your bravery with your blood. Chapter 341. Chaos Army besieged the city. Qi Guanggai led the cavalry to stop in front of a deserted village. Since they left Yunzhao, they have been searching for victims in Jizhao and guiding them to Yunzhao, Kingshao and other places. These days they have achieved good results and have guided many disaster victims. It was noon, and Qi Guanggai was going to let the soldiers rest and feed the horses with fodder. At this moment, a hussar galloped from a distance and said urgently, "Lieutenant, we found a large number of chaotic troops 10 miles away, and they seem to be heading towards Yunzhao city again." Qi Guanggai took out the steamed buns from the bag on the horse's back and prepared to eat. He immediately stuffed the steamed buns back and shouted to the soldiers, "All gather, come with me." After all, Qi Guanggai reined in his horse and followed the hussars to Guting village, 10 miles away on the map. There is only such a village 10 miles away. The cavalry immediately assembled. The reason why Niu Ben handed over so many cavalry to him was because he was afraid that they would encounter a chaotic army, but now he can't care about it anymore. At this time, the Kingzhao army has already gone to Jizhao. If Yunzhao city is besieged by the rebel army, the Kingzhao army will lose its supply line. These crazy hungry rebels don't care whose transportation line this is. The soldiers quickly mounted their horses and followed Qi Guanggai to Guting village. After arriving at Guting village, Qi Guanggai and the soldiers were silent for a while. On the official road leading to Yunzhao city, the dense chaotic army was slowly moving. The chaotic army could not see the end from the south to the north, and the mighty force made one's scalp tingle. "Lieutenant, look, that's the banner of the Blue Dragon King," said a soldier. Qi Guanggai picked up the binoculars and looked over. Sure enough, the marching procession was filled with a banner of the Blue Dragon King. In front of the procession were people with various weapons, while in the back of the procession were people with bags and wheelbarrows. It's just that there is very little food and grass in the car. There must be 300,000 to 400,000 people. A general's collar was full of worry. Yunzhao city is not Kangzhou city, the city wall is no more than 5 meters, and the defenders are no more than 10,000 people. What can we do? Qi Guanggai's brows furrowed. Send someone to inform His Highness and the governor immediately. It is too dangerous for so many people in chaos. This Qinglong King is self-respecting by wrapping up the people. No one knows what he thinks. If he is a loyal person, he can still persuade him to let go. These people put down their weapons and surrender to Her Highness. If this Blue Dragon King Langzi has ambitions, it will be dangerous. The rest of the generals nodded. Qi Guanggai hesitated for a moment and said, "Now we will immediately withdraw to Yunzhao city in case of an accident." After that, he turned his horse's head and headed for Yunzhao city from another official road. A day later, the news reached the governor's house. Hearing this news shocked Xiaoming and Zhong Xingqiang. His Royal Highness, if 300,000 chaotic troops besiege Yunzhao city, the supply line of Governor Ni will be in danger. We must ensure that Yunzhao is safe and sound. Xiaoming also realized the seriousness of this problem. This Qinglong King is not only King Yuang. No one understands his character, but only knows that this Qinglong King led the chaotic army to conquer several cities and open granaries in the city to relieve the victims, and because of this feat, more and more people in Jizhao joined the Qinglong King's subordinates. Now it is said that the Qinglong King's subordinates numbered 50,000 to 600,000. This king understands, but no one knows what the Blue Dragon King's plan is. If the Blue Dragon King's old trick is repeated, what should we do if the city that is going to conquer the fief opens its warehouses? Zhang Xingqiang said sternly. If the Qinglong King has bad intentions, they are rogues. When His Royal Highness sent troops to resist the barbarians, the Qinglong King commanded Yunzhao city. This is not a chaotic minister or a thief. Xiaoming nodded. If the Qinglong king disregarded the righteousness of the nation and only for his own well-being and wealth, he would not have to be merciful this month. The military workshop delivered another 3,000 flintlock guns. He said to Sun Xingcheng, the city of Yunzhao is of great importance. The time does not wait. Tomorrow we will lead 3,000 musketeers to the city of Yunzhao. Although the 3,000 muskets had just been delivered, the soldiers in the King's Hao camp had only been training for about a week, but these soldiers are all elites who participated in the Battle of Kangzhou, not pure recruits. The next day, he and Sun Xingcheng personally led the troops to Yunzhao city because it was an infantry trek. They didn't arrive at Yunzhao city until 3 days later, and according to Qiguanggai's news, the Qinglong king's people were about to leave the city. Arriving at Yunzhao city, Xiao Ming immediately checked the local garrison. There were 6,000 soldiers in Yunzhao, 5,000 of Qiguanggai's cavalry, and 14,000 of his own 3,000 musketeers among them. Qiguanggai's cavalry and his own musketeers were all elite, and the 6,000 Yunzhao soldiers were not weak, so he felt a little at ease. It's just that the city wall is really short. Looking at the Yunzhao city wall, which is only 5 meters high, Xiao Ming frowned. Yunzhao city is just a small city, but now this small city is the lifeblood of logistical supplies. It was already evening, and the news came more and more frequently. Every time the news came back, the chaotic army would arrive immediately just when the sun was only showing a faint afterglow on the horizon. Xiao Ming saw the overwhelming crowd of people. These people continued to the end of the horizon, looking down at a high altitude like an army of army ants. Such a huge lineup immediately made the defenders at the head of the city feel heavy pressure. Xiao Ming and Sun Xingcheng looked at each other with deep worry in their eyes. The people stopped 10 meters outside the city of Yunzhao. The wide official road outside the city was covered with people with various weapons. These people stared indifferently at the defenders at the front of the city. Master Jun, open the door. Didn't you say that Yunzhao city gathers the people? We are all the people of Jizhao. We are starving to death and want to go to the city to eat. A tall man took a few steps forward when he saw the young man on his shoulders, and a loud hoarse voice sounded, you can enter the city, but you must put down your weapons and enter the city in batches. Qiguanggai replied loudly, Master Jun, the weapons in our hands are to fight corrupt officials. What are you so afraid of? Don't say more, let's open the door. These hundreds of thousands of people can expect to eat in the city tonight. The young man snorted and his eyes became sharp. Qiguanggai raised his eyebrows coldly. They were all people who had fought directly with the barbarians, so how could they be afraid of a bunch of chaotic people? He was about to speak when Xiao Ming suddenly said, where's the Qinglong king? Can you let him speak to this king before the battle? This king? Who are you? The young man asked. A certain is Xiao Ming, king of Qi. Xiao Ming's voice was bright, and the people below were all the people of the great Yu kingdom. He didn't want to kill each other unless it was a last resort. King Qi. The young man showed a stunned look. Chapter 342 Tight Strings. P.S. 3 shifts tonight, make up for it tomorrow. A hint of twilight gradually enveloped Yunzhao city. Under the city, the Qinglong king's army gradually lit up with torches, and the densely packed torches stretched far away, with no end in sight. After Xiao Ming reported his identity, whispers gradually rang out among the people in the city. Last year, the news of Xiao Ming's expulsion of the barbarians had already spread throughout the great Yu kingdom along with the newspapers, and many people knew about it. The young man put away his arrogant demeanor. He got back into the crowd, turned around again after a while, followed by a scholar in a black robe. Xiao Ming looked at the scholar, and the scholar also looked at Xiao Ming. After a long time, the scholar said, I have seen His Royal Highness King Qi in the dim light. Xiao Ming couldn't see Qi Xingyi's face clearly. He said directly, King Qinglong, I don't know why you brought your troops to Yunzhao. The natural disaster in Jizhao was not caused by human beings. Of course, King Yuan was wrong, but now that the barbarians are facing the enemy, you should be able to take care of the overall situation. How can you do things that hurt your loved ones and make your enemies happy? At this time, the low voice of the Qinglong king rang out, and he said, Your Highness may have misunderstood. This time is indeed because there is no food in the army, and the people are already very hungry. I just hope that your highness can borrow some food. How could the people of the great Yu kingdom help the barbarians cut off the King's Hao army's food supply? Nonsense, since you are borrowing grain, why don't you go to other cities to borrow grain? Qiguanggai said His Royal Highness has set up the army to wait. How can the defenders of other cities borrow food? After all, in their eyes, we are a disorderly people, and they want to hang them immediately, but we are just a group of ordinary people who have no food to eat, but have no choice but to take up arms. It's just that I heard His Highness's high righteousness, and he was willing to take in us disaster victims, so he had to bring them here. The words of the Qinglong king were clear and orderly. Looking at the disaster victims with no end in sight, Xiao Ming knew that these people are the disaster victims if they are honest, and the rebels if they are not honest. It is impossible for him to take a huge risk to put them into the city. Once the victims are in chaos, he will not only lose a state, but if Niu Bende may not be able to return now, this juncture is not the time to take care of the people. After all, the people are now under the Qinglong king and obey his commands. However, the Qinglong king bluntly said that he borrowed grain. He tentatively said, "There are some in the grain city. Since you want to borrow grain, how much do you plan to borrow?" 300,000 stone grains. The Qinglong king said lightly. Xiao Ming's expression changed. He said, "1 person and 1 stone of food is enough for each disaster victim to eat for several months." King Qinglong, it seems that you are deliberately making things difficult for this king. The Qinglong king's voice was still very calm. He said, "His Royal Highness, how can the natural disaster in Jizhao be relieved in a few months? This seems to be too much." Speaking of this, he already understood the innermost thoughts of the Qinglong king. He is no longer against King Yuan, but against the great Yu kingdom. And what he wants is to overthrow the current imperial court. Now all the cities in the southern part of Jizhao are occupied by the Qinglong king, and now he is looking at Yunzhao city, which is the closest to him, and King Wei, who quickly accumulated following the Qinglong king, also made him willing to follow him to do anything when the disaster victims. Your Highness, the Qinglong king is rebelling. Zhan Xingcheng defined the Qinglong king. Xiao Ming nodded. Until now, the Qinglong king has revealed his true face. Maybe in the beginning, he was indeed leading the people to find a meal out of dissatisfaction, but now the continuous victories seem to have gradually inflated his mentality. He may think that with these victims, he can peep at the supreme throne. At this time, the Qinglong king must also understand that when he takes that step, he can't look back. This is a desperate man, and his eyes are also very vicious. The main force of the King's Hao army is outside, and the interior is empty. It is when his fishermen gain. Since we have embarked on this road, benevolence, righteousness and morality are all bullshit, and what is the national righteousness? Only the winner and loser are the truth. How to do? This is the question Xiao Ming and Zhan Xingcheng are thinking about for a long time. The eyes of the two met, and the army was besieging the city. They only had one choice left, so let's fight. It's just a pity for the innocent people. Xiao Ming sighed in his heart. These people don't understand. Now they can only believe that the Qinglong king who can find food for them is right. He didn't want to use this method to win over the victims, but now it seems that he has to do it. However, he finally persuaded, "King Qinglong, in front of you is the King's Hao army, not King Yong's native chickens. You have to understand, His Royal Highness, I'm just borrowing food. If your Highness is unwilling to borrow it, why bother to say that the people behind me have no food, and I can't control it?" With a cold snort, Xiao Ming was no longer going to pay attention to the Qinglong king. He is too naive. These 300,000 to 400,000 victims will only be encircled and wiped out by the great Yu kingdom in the end, and he will eventually go down the road of failure. Although the great Yu kingdom was in decline, it was more than enough to suppress a rebellion. If King Yuan was not restrained by the barbarians, they would not have survived. Until now the night was getting darker, and the Qinglong king didn't seem to want to attack the city at night, but the 300,000 victims were unable to drain a small city of Yunzhao. It was night, and the Qinglong king looked at the small city of Yunzhao. Just as Xiao Ming had guessed, he would come to take advantage of the situation. Because of the emptiness in King's Hao, the food in Jizhao was almost eaten, and more food was hidden in the city of Jizhao by King Yuan. And now the city of Jizhao is besieged by barbarians. He did not dare to provoke the barbarians. A month ago, his 30,000 strong army was defeated by the barbarian cavalry. Although he also organized training for the people after raising the army, they were no match for the barbarian cavalry. To provoke the barbarians now will only lead to defeat. Therefore, he chose King Qi. In his eyes, King Yuan is a royal person, and King Qi is also a royal person. What is the difference between the two? And in his cognition, King Wei and King Yan are too powerful. And now he is far from an opponent. Therefore, he can only compete with these vassal kings when he takes over the vast land from Jizhao to King's Hao. Looking at Yunzhao city, his ambitions continue to expand. He was no longer the desolate scholar he used to be, but a general who mastered hundreds of thousands of people. While he was thinking about how to attack the city tomorrow, Xiao Ming was also thinking about how to capture this huge team of victims for him. He absolutely did not allow the Qinglong king to bury the lives of these people, but only wanted to capture these people. and some casualties were unavoidable. His Royal Highness, the people of the Qinglong King are just a group of rabble, without any discipline and training, and the people's determination to follow the Qinglong King is not very big. After the official observed, many people looked hesitant, so the official thought that there was no need to do so. To defend the city, we must take the initiative to go out of the city to fight, use the musket team to subdue the people, and the cavalry to round up and make these people surrender. Chapter 343 Fighting. Early in the morning, a loud rooster crowing broke the tranquility of Yunzhou City. Immediately afterwards, thunderous shouts of kill sounded from all directions like a tide. The victims attacked Yunzhou City from the 4 gates at the same time last night. The Yunzhou army and Qingzhou army had been tense all the time, always on guard against the Qinglong King attacking the city. After a quiet night, the Qinglong King finally gave the order to attack the city. Now to the soldiers, these people are no longer victims of disasters, but chaotic troops, and they will never let these chaotic troops destroy their increasingly prosperous hometown. His Royal Highness, let us militiamen also come at this time. Xiao Ming was dressed in military uniform, and the 4 gates were attacked at the same time, and the troops of Yunzhou City were suddenly a little tight at this moment. Suddenly a large number of people with agricultural implements stood in front of him. These people either lived in Yunzhou City, or were evacuated from outside the city to the city, and at this time, they were all angry. Maybe they sympathized with the Qinglong King and these victims at first, but now they only have dissatisfaction and hatred in their hearts. They collected the victims in Yunzhou City, and did their best to them, but now this group of people is going to attack Yunzhou City to them. These people are not even the barbarians. Xiao Ming was a little surprised. He didn't expect that the people would spontaneously organize to help him defend the city. His heart suddenly warmed. After all, his policy of benefiting the people during this period was not in vain. According to the people's will, he has nothing to fear at this time. Another group of people rushed over, but these people were not from Yunzhou, but the victims who had been gathered during this period. An old man said, His Royal Highness King Qi, we are all from Jizhou, but we can't see the Qinglong King attacking Jizhou so indiscriminately. Please let us go to the top of the city and tell our villagers not to attack Yunzhou City. Qinglong, many people in the king's team are our relatives, and the old man believes that they will not blindly obey the Qinglong King at this time. Zhan Xingcheng whispered to Xiao Ming, Your Highness. What this old man said is right. At this time he can use the technique of attacking the heart. If the people outside the city know that their relatives are not worried about food and clothing in Yunzhou City, they will definitely lose morale at this moment. All necessary means must be used, otherwise, once Yunzhou City falls, he will lose everything. Xiao Ming nodded to Zhan Xingcheng with Xiao Ming's approval. Zhan Xingcheng clasped his fists and said to the gathered victims, Thank you, everyone. The victims outside the city don't know the inside story and are afraid of being deceived by those who have a heart. I hope you can speak bluntly at the front of the city, so as not to hurt the innocent. His Royal Highness must have been a great favor for taking us in. There is no reason to not want to return it. Please lead the way. The old man said loudly. Zhan Xingcheng nodded. He first divided the people of Yunzhou City into 4 parts to support the 4 sides of the city gate, and then took the victims to the top of the city. Xiao Ming looked at the busy Zhan Xingcheng and felt a little at ease. He was going to go to the city head to supervise the battle, but was strongly discouraged by Zhan Xingcheng and a group of generals, for fear that he would have an accident at this time and cause chaos in the fiefdom. But since he didn't go to the top of the city, he couldn't sit idle and continue to sit in the camp, deploying troops at any time to support the various city gates. Yunzhou City is a small city with a wall only 3 or 4 miles long. At this time, it was besieged by 300,000 disaster victims, like a mound attacked by army ants facing the flood of victims. The soldiers gritted their teeth and clenched their weapons after the screams of killing outside the city sounded. The victims rushed under the city wall with cloud ladders overwhelming, and hundreds of cloud ladders were erected in an instant along the ladder. The victims scrambled to climb up. At this moment, the only 10 artillery pieces on the top of Yunzhou City began to explode with thunder, and the cannonballs shot out, creating a stream of blood mist in the crowd. These 10 artillery pieces were left by Niu Ben when he went to Jizhou, in order to prevent Yunzhou City from encountering accidents. Boom. 10 artillery pieces fired continuously. The thunderous sound and terrifying lethality immediately caused the siege chaotic army to fall into chaos. Some of the climbing chaotic troops were shocked by the sound of the artillery, and they instinctively fled in panic. The people above are going up, the people above are going down, and people keep falling from the ladder. At this moment, the catapults in the city suddenly threw powder cans out of the city. Knowing that Yunzhou City might be besieged, Xiao Ming brought all the weapons and ammunition that King Zhao City could carry just in case. Boom, the powder canister exploded, and the chaotic army under the city fell in pieces. The two powerful weapons, artillery and gunpowder canister, collapsed after the first wave of siege by the chaotic army at the north gate of Yunzhou City. After thousands of corpses were left behind, the rebel army began to retreat. The Qinglong King looked anxiously at the retreating army. The terrifying weapons of the defenders of Yunzhou City obviously frightened his subordinates. It's just that this is not what worries him the most, because he finds that the defenders of Yunzhou City are completely different from the cities in Jizhou. In the past few months, every time he attacked the city, the defenders at the front of the city almost lacked the will to fight. In his opinion, King Yuang's decadent rule had made these soldiers have no morale to resist, but now he saw determination to fight to the death in the defenders of Yunzhou City. The great Yu kingdom is already rotten to the core. Why are you still working for the faint-hearted royal family? The Qinglong King roared in his heart. At this moment, he could not understand why these Yunzhou defenders were fighting. King Qinglong, the weapons of the Yunzhou defenders are too powerful. What should we do? This is much more terrifying than King Yuang's torches. The young man carrying the big sword had lingering fears. Place the soldiers, reorganize the siege, and let them not panic. We have more than 300,000 people, can't we win a Yunzhou City? King Qi is in Yunzhou City, as long as we break Yunzhou City and capture him alive. The remaining 5 states are not allowed to listen to us. The young man nodded. His name was Zhou Xing, and he was a general under the Qinglong King's banner. After the Qinglong King's uprising, the Qinglong King divided the disaster victims into one song for every 10,000 people, and set one Chu Shui for each song at the same time. He claimed to be the general of the sky, and also set up the general of the earth and the general of the people. Among them, Zhou Xing was the general of the people in this siege. He brought Zhou Xing with him, and left the Digan general Shan Gang to guard the captured city in Jizhou. While collecting the victims, when he learned that King Qi was recruiting victims in Jizhou, King Qinglong was furious, and he was already very dissatisfied with King Qi in his heart. Therefore, this attack on Yunzhou was planned first, and secondly, it came to vent their anger. Glancing at the defenders on Yunzhou City, Zhou Xing immediately summoned the 36 Chu Shui to discuss the siege of the city below. He and the Qinglong King were originally from the same hometown. After the Qinglong King's uprising, he has been by the Qinglong King's side, and he deeply trusts the Qinglong King. After negotiating with Chu Shui, Zhou Xing prepared to let the 2 most powerful Chu Qinglong guards storm the north gate. These 2 soldiers were the first to follow the Qinglong King to attack the city, and they could be called the Qinglong King's personal guards. Chapter 344 The Poisonous Wine of Power. A faint smell of gunpowder smoke filled the battlefield outside Yunzhou City. After repelling the first wave of the chaotic army, there was a terrifying silence on the battlefield. Taking advantage of this gap, Zhan Xingcheng immediately dispatched militiamen, and 30,000 militiamen spontaneously organized in Yunzhou City were assigned to him to the East Gate, South Gate and West Gate respectively. He knew that the North Gate was now the focus of the chaotic army's attack, but Xiao Ming had already made arrangements, and 3,000 musketeers were already on standby at the North Gate. At the same time, Qi Guanggai and his 5,000 cavalrymen had already polished their sabers, ready to cooperate with 3,000 musketeers to directly attack the chaotic army at the North Gate. Looking at the militiamen with determined expressions, who vowed to defend Yunzhou City to the death, a smile appeared on Zhan Xingcheng's mouth. This is the people of King Qi's fief. They support King Qi wholeheartedly. For King Qi and their own homeland, they will go all out with any enemy. The militiamen went to the head of the city and were immediately assigned to their respective positions by the generals of the Yunzhou army. On weekdays, the militias will receive military training in their slack, and even organize joint training between the militias and the army of various states every year. This system has been implemented in the states since the reform of the army. Although the implementation time is not long, these militias basically understand the discipline of the army. In Zhan Xingcheng's view, such militias already have the quality of soldiers. After all, the regular soldier training in the Great Yu Kingdom is just like that, and the difference is not too much. Therefore, Zhan Xingcheng has great confidence in these militias, and it is enough to deal with these chaotic troops. After the deployment of the militia was completed, Zhan Xingcheng sent the victims gathered in Yunzhou City to the front of the city. On the way, he had already told them what to say. When he boarded the city wall, he immediately took thousands of disaster victims headed by the old man to the North Gate. Folks, don't fight anymore. We are all people of Jizhou. The King of Qi is very kind. He gave us porridge in the city to eat, and he will give us land for farming in the future. Why are you so troubled? Facing the reorganized chaotic army, the old man shouted hoarsely, "Xuanzi, I'm your uncle, don't fight with these people, there is food here, there is land to grow, and your parents are also in the city, don't fight." A disaster victim suddenly saw his nephew in the crowd, and was pleasantly surprised. Shouted then, more and more victims found their relatives in the chaos, and more intimate cries sounded from the top of the city. Under the city, the people who saw their relatives looked excited. "Uncle, I'm here, are my father and mother okay?" "Okay, it's all good, we have food and shelter here, it's more comfortable than our previous days." The old man responded. Not long after, there were sobbing sounds from above and below the city, and it was extremely sympathetic to see relatives. "I'm not fighting anymore, I'm going to the city." The young man, who was called Xuanzi, dropped the wooden stick in his hand and shouted, and the people around him were also faintly moved. They originally followed the Qinglong for a meal. Now that they can live comfortably, why fight and kill? Death to the chaotic army. Suddenly, an angry shout came, and a handsome Chu appeared behind Xuanzi. The steel knife slashed heavily from Xuanzi's back, and Xuanzi slowly fell to the ground, staring at him in astonishment. The people around were stunned, their faces paled with fright, and their arms holding weapons began to tremble. When had the Qinglong they supported become so cold, a chill lingered in their hearts for a long time after killing someone. Chu Shui shouted angrily, "Everyone, don't fall for King Qi's tricks. Have you forgotten how King Yuan treated us? The Great Yu Kingdom is already rotten. What is the difference between them and the barbarians? Don't forget that in front of you is the 7th prince of the Great Yu Kingdom. His father is the current king of the Great Yu Kingdom. Only the Qinglong is the holy lord of the world. In the future into Chang'an, countless wealth is ours." Puffed up, that Chu Shui suddenly shouted, "The sky is dead. The Dragon King stands. The sky is dead. The Dragon King stands. The sky is dead. The Dragon King stands." A burst of roars sounded, and the people in front turned their heads, only to see that 20,000 Qinglong guards had gathered behind them unconsciously. This was the most powerful part of the Qinglong on the city wall. Zhan Xingcheng sighed slightly when the slogan, "The sky is dead. The Dragon King stands." He suddenly felt a burst of sadness in his heart. The Qinglong is no longer the unhappy scholar who led the people to ask for food out of anger. Now he has begun to spy on the supreme power, just like those who have raised troops to rebel throughout the ages. Right as a glass of poisonous wine that becomes more addictive the more you drink it. Once it is picked up, it is difficult to put down. Zhan Xingcheng thought so. Shuozi. The old man cried hoarsely when he saw his nephew being killed. The other victims on the city wall suddenly became angry in their hearts, and they looked at Chu Shui below and gritted their teeth. "Everyone, let's go down." Zhan Xingcheng said. At this time he did not expect that the Qinglong had become so hysterical, and had already begun to slaughter his own people so brutally. However, the attack on the heart just now has shaken many people's minds. "No, I won't go down, I want to avenge Xuanzi." The old man shouted. "We're not going down either, we're going to pick up our relatives back." The victims immediately became noisy. Just when he was worried, the north gate suddenly opened slowly with a creaking sound. 3,000 musketeers quickly formed a line outside the city gate, and 3 rows of soldiers held their flintlock pistols. And Qi Guanggai's cavalry is also reorganizing the formation. He looked at a figure in front of the north gate. That was King Qi, and it seemed that the slogan, "The sky is dead, the Dragon King stands," finally made him make up his mind. In the chaos of the army, the Qinglong was hiding in it. When he saw the north gate wide open, he was suddenly overjoyed. He did not expect that the Yunzhao defenders would be so stupid. He immediately gave the order to attack. "Come on." After receiving the order, the people in the previous songs began to charge again under the urging of Qinglong. At the gate of the city, 3,000 musketeers were waiting. The first row of musketeers pulled the trigger as the rebels rushed into the firing range. Boa. The white smoke was accompanied by the fire, and the soldiers of the Chaos Army in front fell one after another. The people in the back were so frightened when they saw this scene that they didn't have the will to fight. How could they dare to continue rushing in the face of such a flaming weapon? After the people in front fell, they immediately retreated in horror. Zhou Xing was also shocked by the scene and turned pale. For a while he didn't know whether he should continue to lead the Qinglong into the formation. Just when he hesitated, a thunderous voice resounded on the city gate again. Then a scream rang out, and a string of blood mist splashed around him, and blood splattered all over his face. He looked at the city wall, and the defenders on the city wall were aiming a firearm-like weapon in his direction. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345. Boom! Another burst of gunfire sounded, and several shells landed in the queue of King Longwei. Zhou was terrified. Now they had become the target of the defenders. Every time this powerful weapon fired, it would cause a large number of casualties to its own soldiers. Under the fear, he suddenly lost his footing, and the other King Longwei soldiers also showed signs of collapse. What only shocked them even more came when the soldiers at the north gate with stick weapons started walking towards them in neat steps amid the sound of drums. At the same time, the rumble of horses' hooves sounded, and the cavalry wearing silver breastplates in Yunzhou City galloped out. They raised their sabers, lined up in a neat formation, and caught up with the scattered soldiers with lightning speed. The extremely fast speed caused the war horse to rush through the crowd, and many people were directly stepped on the horse's hoof. At this moment, the advantages of the cavalry were vividly displayed, and the chaotic army with a variety of weapons could not prevent the effective resistance at all. In the chaos, the people who had lost their will to fight began to flee, and no matter how Shuai Chu couldn't stop the people from escaping. Zun Xingcheng watched this scene with a sneer. Every soldier is flesh and blood and has his own mind. When fighting a war, every soldier will first think about a question: why are they fighting? And the more firm they are in their original intention to fight, the more courageous the soldiers will be when fighting. Now the thoughts of the Qinglong King and the common people are obviously very different. What the Qinglong King wanted was the world, and what the people wanted was to fill their stomachs. For them, as long as they put down their weapons and entered Yunzhou City, they no longer need to worry about starvation. Because of this, the people quickly descended into chaos. After their defeat, the collapse started from the north gate and quickly spread to other city gates. The Qinglong King's army was originally a temporary group of people, and there was no military spirit at all. Seeing other people collapse, the other Chu soldiers also began to collapse. At this time, Qi Guanggai shouted loudly, "The descendants will not be killed. The descendants do not kill. The descendants do not kill." There was also a deafening sound at the top of the city. Wherever the cavalry passed, the people in extreme fear dropped their weapons one by one and knelt on the ground. The Qinglong King, who was hiding in the chaotic army, was shocked when he saw this scene. But now the entire army is in chaos. The soldiers can't find generals, there will be no soldiers, and he can't organize the army to resist, and the front line attacked the back line, which made his army more and more chaotic. Dong dong dong, dong dong dong. The neat drum beat is getting closer and closer, with a thumping sound at each interval. Seeing that the army could not be stopped from dispersing, the Qinglong King immediately mixed into the crowd with his personal soldiers and fled. At this moment, he suddenly understood that King Qi was not King Yuan, and King Qi's army was not King Yang's army. He further understood that King Qi's victory over the barbarians in Kangzhou was not a fluke, but because he had a good fighting army. Looking at Yunzhou City unwillingly, turning around, he found Zhou Xing in the crowd, and he quickly approached the Qinglong Wei. In Zhou Xing's hand is the real trump card in his hand. As long as this army is there, he can make a comeback. Your Highness, we won. When Xiaoming climbed to the top of the city, Zun Xingcheng bowed and said. Xiaoming nodded. Having lived in the Great Yu Kingdom for almost 2 years, Xiaoming already had his own understanding of the cold weapon war. In fact, he dared to come to Yunzhou City because he believed that his army would be able to defeat this seemingly numerous chaotic army. After all, in ancient times, an army of hundreds of thousands was terrifying to say, but there were often only tens of thousands of troops who could really fight among these hundreds of thousands. The same is true of the Qinglong King's army. Most of the army is just people who push a wheelbarrow to transport food and grass. These people even ran away if they were defeated. During the Three Kingdoms period, Cao was able to subdue the main force of the Yellow Turban army with 5,000 troops and horses, which shows the difference between the regular army and the chaotic people. There are a lot of people who have surrendered. It seems that we have to find a way to settle these people. In the telescope, a large number of people in the places where Qi Guanggai passed by chose to surrender. As he guessed, as long as there was food to eat, who would want to rebel against the Qinglong King? The reason for this is that I can't live anymore. Zun Xingcheng pondered for a while and said, Your Highness, although these Jizhou people surrendered, they had followed the Qinglong King and killed the officers and soldiers of the Great Yu Kingdom. They scattered and moved to different prefectures and counties, turning the crowd into a small number and a small number into nothing. Otherwise, once someone is bewitched, they are likely to repeat, and then the city of Yunzhou will be in danger. Xiaoming took it seriously, and Zun Xingcheng's words spoke to his heart. These people in Jizhou are not a demographic dividend for him now, but a hot potato, because these people are likely to revolt again because of certain things. After all, With the first time, the second time will be easy, not to mention that there is no guarantee that there will not be a few ill-willed people among these surrendering people. Therefore, only when these people integrate into the local life, gradually accept a new life, and identify with his fief, these people will become a demographic dividend. And before that they were ticking time bomb. The victory outside the city was outstanding, and at this time the Yunzhao troops who were defending the city also went out of the city to cooperate with Qi Guanggai to gather the people. 2 hours later, Yunzhao Chengcheng gradually calmed down. His Royal Highness, the number of chaotic troops is too many and too chaotic, so let the Qinglong King run away. Qi Guanggai came to report to Xiaoming. At this time the Blue Dragon King escaped within Xiaoming's expectations. It was easy to defeat the Blue Dragon King, but it was not easy to catch it. After all, it was very chaotic with hundreds of thousands of people. The scattered people hindered the Qinglong King, and also prevented Qi Guanggai from pursuing him in time. Forget it, don't chase after them anymore. The most important thing is to gather these victims. After this incident, he won't come easily again. Xiaoming said. Qi Guanggai nodded, and immediately led the cavalry to gather the people. This battle was fought from morning to noon, and it was another afternoon to gather the victims. In the evening, Zhan Xingchang handed him the approximate number of victims, 150,000 people. It seems that more than 100,000 people are still separated. Tomorrow, let Qi Guanggai continue to guide the victims into the fiefdom. These victims can only be reduced to the tools of the Qinglong King in Jizhao. Once the siege of Jizhao contacts the imperial court and Yang the king is about to deal with the Qinglong King, and at that time these people would inevitably end up with a tragic death. And now that the great Yu kingdom has been riddled with holes, this king does not want to see the people lose their lives for the Qinglong King's personal ambitions. Your Highness is righteous. Zhan Xingchang bowed and said, it would be great if King Qinglong could be as important as His Highness in defending against barbarians. Chapter 346 The Meat Grinder begins. P.S. There is another chapter later. The smoke of the cooking smoke floated outside the city of Yunzhao. The more than 100,000 people who surrendered were divided by the Yunzhao army to prevent them from gathering again. At the same time, hundreds of large pots were set up on the land outside the city, and rice porridge was boiled in the pots. The faint fragrance of rice made all the victims swallow their saliva. Qi Guanggai was constantly patrolling the place on horseback. The victims were already waiting for the porridge in front of the cauldron. Now the rumors that Yunzhao city gathered the victims has become a reality. The rice porridge in front of them also made these people feel at ease. Who wants to fight for a meal when they have food to eat? It's just that the gathering of hundreds of thousands of people is indeed a very dangerous thing. They have been ordered to send these disaster victims to the fiefs and states in batches for resettlement, and the order is not to force these victims to relocate, but also to seek their own will. Everyone, the disaster victims in the city have also told you, Your Highness Renai. He said that as long as they are willing to migrate to Qingzhou, the people of Qingzhou and other states can get their own land, and they can live in peace in these places from now on. After this meal tonight, those who are willing to go with us will gather at the north gate at that time, and then someone will naturally enthrone you and assign you to different places. After a pause, Qi Guanggai continued, of course, if you don't want us, we won't force it. Each person will send 3 pounds of rice, and you can go where you want to go. The victims all listened to Qi Guanggai's words with pricked ears. As soon as his voice fell, there were bursts of whispers among the victims. Qi Guanggai observed these people. According to these people, they were all people who had just been with the Qinglong King, and some of them were even dragged into the Qinglong King's army by their fellow villagers. Moreover, there were originally many people who were going to take refuge in Yunzhao, but when they encountered the army of the Qinglong King, they could only be carried by them. But they did not expect that the Qinglong King would choose to attack the city. They used to be dutiful people. They didn't want to fight at all, and most of them just wanted to flee. Master, are you telling the truth? Are there any land points here? Said a daring man. Qi Guanggai said, this is still fake. Some of the disaster victims in the city have already been allocated land in Yunzhao. You can go and ask. The people who are cooking porridge in front of them are those who have escaped. The man didn't cheat. He went straight to the front. And after a few questions, he came back. When the other victims saw him coming back, they asked, is it true or false? Really? He said that he had allocated 20 acres of land, and the Yunzhao government office also gave him food rations, saying that he would return it to the government after the cultivated land was harvested, and he would not pay food for 3 years. And this good thing. The surrounding victims were surprised. It was like a dream for them. Qi Guanggai smiled and went to other places to convey the policy on migration to the victims. With a mouthful of hot porridge and generous policies, the victims gradually let down their guard. and under the strict discipline of the Yunzhao army and the Qingzhao army. There were no victims who were bullied by soldiers. This made the victims more and more yearn for that different world, and many victims gathered at night with their families to discuss whether to migrate the next day. The North Gate was filled with people who wanted to migrate to the Lizhao. Xiaoming and Zhang Xingcheng were very relieved to see this scene. As long as the policy is good, they are not afraid that they will not be able to attract these victims. Between hell and heaven, the choice is easy to make. Of course, some victims were reluctant to leave their hometowns. As promised, Xiaoming gave them food rations to go to their relatives in other places. Xiaoming's act of kindness made him quickly establish his prestige among the disaster victims. After all, there are many people who talk big in the Day of Congress, but there are not many people who can really fulfill their promises. Because of this, Xiaoming's seemingly insignificant charity made the victims from Jizhao grateful, and his good deeds were further spread as the victims went to all directions. What surprised Xiaoming was that many of the victims who escaped from the last battle came back spontaneously to accept the arrangement of the Yunzhao government to settle in the 6 states in just over 10 days. Yunzhao counted 200,000 displaced victims, and this number is still increasing. His Royal Highness, the matter of the disaster victims is finally in order, but it is a pity that the people who died in battle. This Qinglong king is really hateful. In front of the barbarian enemy, he doesn't want to serve the country. Zhang Xingcheng said angrily. Xiaoming nodded. The heart is not enough to swallow an elephant, but this Qinglong king is probably not an easy person to deal with, otherwise he will not be able to easily conquer several prefectures and counties. His Royal Highness said it is very true. Zhang Xingcheng pondered for a while. This time, the surprise of the artillery and flintlock guns caused the chaotic army to collapse so quickly. If it were an ordinary weapon, I am afraid it would be a deadly battle. The two were talking when suddenly there was a loud noise outside, and then Zhao Long and Zhao Hu, who had been guarding outside the door, walked in with the help of a scout covered in blood. Xiaoming and Zhang Xingcheng changed their colors. Seeing Xiaoming, the scout said weakly, "Your Highness, the barbarian reinforcements have arrived, and the Qingzhao army led by the governor Niu was besieged by 80,000 barbarians in Fencheng. The food and grass were robbed by the Qinglong king again." After all, the scout fainted. Crack. Xiaoming slapped one hand on the table, his chest heaving violently. Qinglong, shameless gangster, don't you see the righteousness of the nation in your eyes?" Zhang Xingcheng also blushed. He first attacked Yunzhao, and now he has robbed food. This Qinglong king ignored the Qingzhao army and the Forbidden Army who were resisting the barbarians on the front line. What kind of rebel army is this? It is simply a gangster. This mountain camp is also trash. Zhang Xingcheng stomped his feet when Niu Ben set off. Part of the Shanzi battalion went to Jizhao with the Qingzhao army with food and grass. After arriving at Fencheng in Jizhao, Niu Ben ordered to wait to join the imperial army, while looking for an opportunity to break through Chagatae's blockade of Jizhao because Niu Ben judged that this battle might take a long time. He let the Shanzi battalion continue to transport and store grain for a month. After all, he was worried that he would also be besieged now that the food and grass have been robbed. The food reserves of the Qingzhao army are not enough, which makes Xiaoming not in a hurry. His Royal Highness, Fencheng is a small city that is inferior to Yunzhao city, and the city wall is nothing more than an earthen wall. The top priority is to lift the siege of Fencheng. Zhang Xingcheng calmed down and reminded Xiaoming's side. He didn't expect a war to be so difficult. Now that Bishan reinforcements have arrived, this city of Jizhao will probably become a meat grinder. He said to Zhang Xingcheng, "I ordered Qi Guanggai to lead 5,000 cavalry and 3,000 musketeers to quickly rush to the aid of Fencheng. If this battle is defeated, there will be no place for the royal family in the north." Chapter 347. Fencheng, Niu Ben, Lu Fei, Luo Xin and other generals were discussing how to deal with the next battle in a private house when they were stationed in Fencheng and waited to join the Forbidden Army. Reinforcements from the barbarians suddenly arrived, and 80,000 cavalrymen blocked the siege of a small Fencheng. The Shanzi battalion collapsed without a fight, and the city only had food for 15 days. The barbarians learned about the situation in the city from the captured Shanzi battalion soldiers, so they decided to adopt the siege tactics. "Commander, go out. Now the barbarians will definitely have the same idea as Jizhao city. They are going to trap us, and at the same time eliminate the reinforcements who came to help. Now the news of our siege will definitely reach His Highness. Are we waiting? Are they here to die?" There was no fear on Lu Fei's face, only determination. Niu Ben pondered and said nothing. The barbarian cavalry outside the city was Beishan's reinforcement. He didn't know whether Beishan was in the army, but the barbarian artillery did arrive. Luo Xin stood up at this time and scolded, "Let's not say anything else. At least kill the barbarian artillery, otherwise the barbarian artillery is a great threat to the Car formation, and these barbarian dogs are bombarding Fen with their own artillery. City, this will let them know how powerful our artillery is. That's right, General, let's fight, you can't wait to die in Fencheng. The other generals said one after another. After pondering for a while, Niu Ben said, now is not the time, we can't rashly fight when the Imperial Army is not here. I believe Luo Quan, he knows what to do now. Beishan wants to besiege us, we may not be able to give him a front and back attack. Is the Forbidden Army really okay? Lu Fei didn't believe in the combat effectiveness of the Forbidden Army. Luo Xin said at this time, the Forbidden Army may not be as good as our King's Hao Army, but the Jinwu Wei led by my father is also a first-class soldier of the Great Yu Kingdom. At least they will not run away like the group of cowards in Shanxiang. Can you fight? See you on the battlefield. Lu Fei snorted. He was slightly dissatisfied that the Imperial Army was coming too slowly. If things went on like this, they would be starved to death once the food and grass ran out. Niu Ben frowned. Now that Fencheng is under siege, he has also lost contact with the outside world, and he does not know how many people have come from the barbarians. In the barbarian camp outside Jizhao City, Beishan sat upright in the center, and Chagatai, Gudo and other Blood Wolf tribe leaders gathered in the camp. This time, the Blood Wolf tribe came out, 150,000 Blood Wolf riders plus 200,000 slave soldiers, and 350,000 troops came. Beishan was very ambitious. The rebellion in Jizhao greatly damaged the vitality of King Yuang, and he could not take them into consideration at all. This time their army entered Jizhao without encountering any decent resistance at all. This made Beishan more and more confident. Heiji, Jizhao City has been besieged by us for more than a month, and now morale is low. It is time to siege the city. At this time, take Jizhao City and destroy the main force of the King's Hao army. With Jizhao as a stronghold, King Qi will no longer be able to fight back. Chagatai said respectfully. No, King Yuang is already a rat in his pocket. He won't be able to jump for a few days. The most important thing now is the 30,000 King's Hao army in Fencheng. If they attack Jizhao, they will attack from behind, and we will be attacked by the enemy. Beishan said slowly. Chagatai heard the words and said with a smile, what Taiji said is very, very clever, brilliant. Taiji, the Forbidden Army of the Great Yu Kingdom is 30 miles away. I thought I couldn't wait any longer. We should attack Fencheng with all our strength to destroy the King's Hao army. The death of Qiu He this time shows the strength of the King's Hao army. The King's Hao army still possesses strange weapons. If King Qi is given a few more years to develop, this King Qi may be a serious problem for our Golden Horde. Guduo said loudly. Beishan looked at Guduo. You mean to attack Fencheng now? Yes, Taiji. Guduo lowered his head. Beishan glanced at Guduo lightly, and said, the Forbidden Army is just a mob. There is nothing to worry about. Just send all the cavalry to block the Forbidden Army's help. And now the King's Hao army's food and grass can only last for half a month. When the time comes without food, they will be in chaos. Guduo frowned. The Blood Wolf tribe had never fought against the Imperial Army, but the Huayanchuo tribe said that Luo Quan was not a simple character. He opened his mouth and saw Beishan's stern eyes and finally said nothing. 30 miles away, Luo Quan led Jinwu Wei to Fencheng. At this moment, a scout came to report, General, the King's Hao army is besieged in Fencheng, 30 miles away from Jizhao City. And the situation is critical. What? Luo Quan's expression changed greatly. He asked, how many people came from the barbarians? At least 150,000 cavalry and 200,000 slave soldiers, said the scout. Luo Quan's face became more and more ugly. Beishan's Blood Wolf tribe was one of the most powerful cavalry of the barbarians. Beishan is going to seize the country in the north in one fell swoop. After pondering for a while, Luo Quan said, continue to monitor the movement of the barbarian cavalry, and now rush to Fencheng immediately. This time, Luo Quan brought all the elites of the Imperial Army of the Great Yu Kingdom. Among them, there were 60,000 cavalrymen, 30,000 spearmen, 40,000 swordsmen, and 20,000 archers. These soldiers are all Jinwu Wei, the elite soldiers he personally trained. Yes. The scout responded immediately and left. The army continued to move forward, and within 10 li suddenly a scout came to report urgently, and 70,000 cavalrymen of the barbarians were coming towards the army. Luo Quan frowned when he heard the words. The barbarians wanted to keep them out of Fencheng at this time, and he could see through their thoughts at a glance. At this time, Luo Hong said to his father, Father, General Niu Ben has not moved in Fencheng. It should be waiting for us to attack the barbarian cavalry. At this time, my father should send 60,000 cavalry to Dede or to Fencheng. and 90,000. The infantry stood firm. Luo Quan looked at his eldest son with admiration. Luo Hong was quite wise. He said, "Leave 10,000 cavalry with you, so I will leave it to you here. I will lead the cavalry one step ahead." Luo Hong nodded with a solemn expression. "Father, please take care of yourself." A flash of concern flashed in Luo Quan's eyes, but he didn't say anything. In the end, motivating the horse under his seat, Luo Quan led most of the cavalry towards Fencheng. As soon as Luo Quan left, Luo Hong's expression immediately became firm, and he began to give orders. The soldiers immediately began to change their formations, and after a while, the 90,000 infantry soldiers turned into a large formation of 90,000 people. Just as the great formation was completed, a cloud of dust suddenly rose in the distance, and the barbarian cavalry quickly approached. Chagatai personally led the cavalry who came to stop the Forbidden Army, and Beisham sat in Jizhou City to coordinate the overall situation, leading the cavalry to stop in front of the formation. Chagatai looked at the formation of 9,000 people with a trace of disdain. Jizhou has a horse in Pingchuan, and fighting cavalry in such a place is simply courting death. Chapter 348 Secret Weapon. A bleak warm wind blew dust towards Jinwuwei's great formation in the hot and dry September. The vast lowest land outside the city of Jizhou is even colder than winter. The Jinwuwei, the most elite forbidden army in the Great Yu Kingdom, and the Blood Wolf Wei, one of the strongest cavalry of the barbarians, will start a fight here at this moment. Luo Hong looked at the barbarian cavalry 300 meters away. The hand holding the sword around his waist turned white from too much force. He was a brother who fought in wars, and was a father and son soldier. He followed Luo Quan to fight in the north and south since he was a child. In the more than 20 years of getting along, he could understand the look of his father. Worry about the country and forget about yourself. Sacrifice your life for righteousness. This is exactly what his father wanted to say, and this is the family motto that the Luo family has passed down from their ancestors. Looking past the soldiers in front, Luo Hong's eyes gradually became firmer. In order to save the Great Yu Kingdom from danger, Jinwuwei would not retreat, and Luo Hong would not retreat either. Wu, the horn of the barbarian attack began to sound, and as was the custom in the past to fight against the barbarians on the steppe, the barbarians' horse and shooters were dispatched first. They urged their horses to rush towards Jinwuwei's battle formation. At a distance of 50 meters from the battle formation, the barbarian horsemen suddenly shot a wave of arrows. Raise your shield. The captains in the array gave orders one after another. Immediately, the sword and shield hands behind the 10,000 people raised their shields one after another. This kind of shield is about 1 meter long, and the surface is made of wood but covered with a layer of iron. In an instant, the silver shield turned face up, protecting the bowmen and spearmen under the shield. When their movements were completed, the overwhelming bow and arrow came in a blink of an eye. Ding ding. The dense bows and arrows fell on the shield and made the sound of metal friction, and the arrows of the barbarians pierced the iron and nailed them to the wooden shield at the same time. Screams also sounded at this moment, and soldiers were killed by bows and arrows in places that were not protected by shields, and they fell one after another. Bowmen, fire arrows. After the barbarian cavalry shot a round of bows and arrows, an order was suddenly passed down. At this moment, the bowman suddenly raised his strong crossbow, and with a loud whoosh sound, the dense arrows flew towards the barbarian cavalry 50 meters away. The barbarians who were about to turn and attack the formation of the Great Yu Kingdom's army from both flanks suddenly turned their backs on their horses. It's just that the barbarians didn't stop their cavalry shooting. They started to move to the sides along the formation of Jinwuwei. During the movement, they used bows and arrows to attack the soldiers in the battle formation. From time to time, Luo Hong observed the situation on the battlefield. The way the barbarians attacked the Great Yu Kingdom has never changed, but this method is also the most troublesome. The cavalry and archery of the barbarians are not the main arms. In fact, they are only auxiliary arms. The task of these cavalry and archery is to disrupt the dense battle formation of infantry by raiding, because the barbarians are rarely able to get cheap in the face of dense infantry battles. At this time, the crowd of barbarians mounted and shot like a flood, hitting a stone, and immediately split to both sides. At this time, Luo Hong asked the standard bearer to play the semaphore, and at the same time the drums were beaten. Stay in formation, stay in formation. A series of orders sounded in the battle formation, and the soldiers in the battle formation continued to suffer casualties under the harassment of barbarian horses. Luo Hong gritted his teeth. He knew that he had to withstand this wave of casualties, and there was nothing he could do for the sake of Fencheng. Luo Quan took most of the cavalry, and the remaining 10,000 cavalry were used on the blade on the opposite side. Chagatai was also watching the battle between the two armies. The Jinwuwei of the Imperial Army really lives up to its reputation. Under such circumstances, he can still maintain his formation. Chagatai said with a frown. Guduo said loudly, "This Jinwu Wei is the elite army of General Luo Quan, and only this Luo Quan can fight in the Forbidden Army. Really? Since this is the case, we can't let this Jinwu Wei leave Jizhao." Chagatai said coldly, "Now the King Zhao army is besieged by us in Fencheng, and the food route has been cut off by us." Taiji also explained before departure. "We have to cut off the food route first, and then besiege the Imperial Army, and you immediately lead 20,000 light cavalry to bypass the rear, and burn their food and grass while their food route has not yet entered the camp." Guduo nodded, and urged the horse under his seat to lead the light cavalry to copy the backbred of Jinwu Wei. Watching Guduo leave, Chagatai once again looked at the two armies that were fighting. His purpose was to prevent the Forbidden Army from rushing to help Fencheng, and to stop the Forbidden Army here at the least cost. Therefore, he was not going to let the heavy cavalry behind him launch a charge to fight head-on, but continued to harass him with cavalry shooting. If the custodians can't stand it, it's time for them to reap. When he was complacent, a scout suddenly came to report and said, "Head of the flag, we found a large number of cavalry from the Great Yu Kingdom rushing towards Fencheng." Hearing this, Chagatai's eyes narrowed, and he understood that the purpose of the band troops in front of him was the same as his. They were all to contain each other's forces. Fencheng is the real battlefield, in Yunzhao City. A carriage from King Zhao slowly drove into the city. Sitting on the carriage, Lin Wentao looked at the dilapidated city curiously. After receiving Xiao Ming's order, they arrived here with a hot air balloon. Lin Wentao, while he was looking around, a majestic voice sounded, and when he turned his head, he saw King Qi walking towards him. "Your Highness." Lin Wentao got off the horse and bowed. Xiao Ming's expression was urgent at this time, and he didn't stick to these etiquettes. He asked directly, "Have you mastered the simple manipulation of this hot air balloon, His Royal Highness?" The advertisements these days are all placed by students from our School of Physics, manipulating hot air balloons around King Zhao City. Lin Wentao looked serious since Xiao Ming ordered them to come to Yunzhao. They knew that they might face a war. Looking at the arrival of the hot air balloon, Xiao Ming breathed a sigh of relief. Now he has used all means of warfare, mature and immature, because once he loses this time, he has worked hard for 2 years in vain. Similarly, if the barbarians lose the war this time, the land of Yaozhao will be at your fingertips. That's good. This king wants to give you a very important task. Now the governor of Nilbin is besieged by barbarians in Fencheng, and the news is cut off. This king hopes that you can go to Jizhao to investigate the information, and at the same time pass the news to Nilbin. Xiao Ming said. Hearing this, Lin Wentao looked at the two people who were also sitting on the horse and said, "His Royal Highness, his name is Liang Yubin, his name is Yi Chang. These two are the two of them manipulating the hot air balloon. It's definitely no problem to leave this matter to them. They are all counting on merit." When Xiao Ming heard the words, he immediately smiled. Under the reward, there must be a brave man. He said to Liang Yubin and Yi Chang, "Okay, if you can complete the task this time, this king promised to give you 2 titles after the war." Liang Yubin and Yi Chang were overjoyed. Now everyone on the fief is counting on whether they can become the first batch of title winners. Xiao Ming was relieved and hoped that the appearance of this secret weapon, the hot air balloon, on the battlefield would at least scare the barbarians. Chapter 349 Stalemate. Take these powder cans with you. 2 outside the city of Yunzhao, the cavalry and musketeers led by Qi Guanggai were waiting for the order to leave. Lin Wentao and others came in time. If they were later, they would have left this time. Zhan Xingcheng is also going to Jizhao. The flying distance of the hot air balloon is too short, and it must be launched in a short distance to play a real role. Therefore, Qi Guanggai and the musket team rushed to the rescue and were also responsible for protecting the hot air balloon. After all, now that Fencheng is under siege, they have cut off news of each other, unable to communicate with Nilbin and unable to launch an attack in time before leaving. Xiao Ming also handed some powder cans to Liang Yubin, although their most important task was to be responsible for information transmission and investigation. But the occasional throwing of a powder can at a barbarian army might also have unexpected effects. Ready, Xiao Ming patted Liang Yubin and Yi Cheng on the shoulders, meaning that the two of them had a heavy task. Liang Yubin and Yi Cheng were also bold people who dared to fly a hot air balloon. At this time, they didn't feel anything. Moreover, for them, the hot air balloon was in the air, and no one could hit them. Zhan Xingcheng, this is the last elite of this king, and I leave it to you. After saying this sentence, Xiao Ming suddenly felt a little sad, and he had a sense of grief and indignation on the battlefield. Let's retreat, the commander. If we fight again, The brothers will be defeated, but now he is indeed faced with this kind of situation that is called the failure of the day and the unresponsiveness of the earth. Even if he had a little available soldiers in his hand, he would not let King Wei's Shifu Shanzi battalion escort the food and grass. Speaking of which, he has been worried these days. The soldiers in Yunzhou city could not move. After the first batch of food and grass was transported, the second batch of food and grass was still robbed. He felt more distressed than anyone else. Blue Dragon King, now you are dancing happily. This king will pull the list with you and settle the account. Xiao Ming clenched his fists. Fancheng Luo Quan led 50,000 cavalrymen to station 5 miles away, and the scouts who went out to investigate kept sending news back. At this time, the barbarians were setting up camps around Fancheng, and they had the idea of trapping the King's Zhao army to death. The 50,000 cavalry stretched for several miles, and he could not launch an attack for the time being. He could only consider whether to attack until all the cavalry arrived. Set up camp, Luo Quan gave an order. At this time, hundreds of thousands of troops from the Forbidden Army, barbarians, and King's Zhao army gathered around Jizhao. This war will last for a while. Like them, the barbarians also travel long distances. The soldiers need to eat, and it is impossible to fight all day long. It is also necessary to cook rice in a pot. The cavalry arrived one after another, and the auxiliary soldiers began to build temporary tents. At this time, Luo Xin glanced at the direction he was coming from, and he was a little worried about Luo Hong. If he was not left to confront the barbarian cavalry, the cavalry he led would definitely be entangled by the barbarian cavalry, and it was even more impossible for him to be stationed not far from Fancheng. Taking out the binoculars, Luo Quan glanced at the direction of Fancheng. In front of him was a dense pack of barbarians, and the barbarian cavalry were shuttled between the packs. Some barbarian scouts were moving this way, apparently spotting them. However, like them, the barbarians did not seem to have any intention of going to war immediately, but some barbarian cavalry had already gathered, as if to prepare for their sudden attack. Seeing this scene, he ordered the soldiers to take turns to cook rice, some of the cavalry on guard, and some to eat first. In his opinion, the barbarians seemed to be in no hurry to fight. Their goal is the King's Zhao army, and Fancheng Niu Ben, an old friend, has come to save you. Luo Quan shook his head with a wry smile. There was no war all night. On the second day, the scouts came to the news that Luo Hong's group was at a stalemate with the barbarian cavalry. Hearing this news, Luo Quan breathed a sigh of relief. Jin Wu Yi didn't seem to be collapsing under the leadership of Luo Hong. As long as the soldiers didn't mess around, Luo Hong could continue to contain the barbarian cavalry. Peace of mind. Luo Quan began to analyze the current battle situation. Obviously now the barbarians have the advantage because the barbarians not only had 150,000 cavalry troops but also 200,000 slave soldiers, and they knew very well that the King's Zhao army had only enough food for 15 days. As long as the King's Zhao army is trapped, the King's Zhao army will be in chaos because of the lack of food and grass. Although Luo Quan was impatient, he couldn't get in touch with Niu Ben, and he didn't know where to attack for the time being. After all, at this time, it is only possible to break through the siege of the barbarians by cooperating with the inside and outside. He knew very well that with his 50,000 troops, he could not defeat the barbarians and rescue Niu Ben. However, the situation at this time did not allow him to wait here like this. He had already sent someone to pass the news to Xiao Ming and discuss countermeasures. Just when he was thinking about how to arrange the attack, suddenly a cavalry general came galloping. General, the barbarians sent 20,000 horses to attack our food and grass. The soldiers who escorted the food and grass suffered heavy casualties. Please send troops to help. The cavalry general gasped violently. The food and grass of the 150,000 strong army stretched for dozens of miles, all of which were transported by the people recruited by Chang'an, and the food and grass were protected by the soldiers of Jinwu Wei. If the food and grass are cut off, the 150,000 strong army will not be able to support it for a few days. Luo Quan asked eagerly, how is the food and grass now, General? The last commander fought his way out of the siege, but there were too many barbarian cavalry, and they were light cavalry, coming and going like the wind. Although the soldiers fought desperately to resist, I'm afraid they won't be able to support it for long. Now that General Luo Hong is also besieged by the barbarians, the last commander can only ask the general for help. Luo Quan's brows were furrowed. The dispatch of troops to Jizhao is really difficult at home and abroad. Originally, they could rely on the city of Jizhao to store food and grass. However, the cities in the southern part of Jizhao are now occupied by the rebel army, and they can only go on an expedition with food and grass at this time. The long transportation line will inevitably become the target of harassment by the barbarian cavalry. which is also what he expected, so he dispatched elite soldiers to protect the food route, but the barbarian cavalry is obviously not so easy to deal with. Thinking of this, he said to one of the generals behind him, "Now you immediately send 10,000 cavalry to help." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly heard a faint woo horn sound. At this time, the generals looked towards the direction of Fencheng, and the dense barbarian cavalry appeared in their field of vision. This Bei Shan is really a master of soldiers. He stopped my reinforcements and robbed me of food. Now he is trying to contain us, so that we can't help. General, how can this be good? The cavalry general said worriedly. Luo Quan frowned. Food and grass are the foundation of conquest, and there must be no accident. You all go to help immediately, and I will deal with it here. Yes, General. Having said that, the cavalry generals immediately headed southwest with 10,000 people. At this time, the barbarian cavalry really launched a charge. They tried to prevent this group of cavalry from leaving the camp. Luo Quan roared and took the cavalry forward. Chapter 350 Reversal. P.S. Tonight's fourth watch, there is a chapter later. Snail originally wanted to add more updates today, but the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. There are too many things, but Snail promises to add more tomorrow, otherwise the live broadcast will cut JJ in the bank account. Bei Shan was carefully examining the map of Jizhao. Since the truce with the Ottoman Empire in the west, he has aimed at the Great Yu Kingdom. The heavy snow and severe cold last winter made him firm up this idea. The shaman also said that the coldness of the grassland will continue, and it will even get colder year by year. It's just that his idea has not been approved by the tribal leaders. In their opinion, the Golden Horde has just reached a truce with the Ottoman Empire. At this time, they should rest and recuperate for a few years before using troops against the Great Yu Kingdom. The tribal leaders with this idea were headed by Wu Shugu, and they refused to use the whole country of the Golden Horde to attack the Great Yu Kingdom. Therefore, in the Jizhao Rebellion, he chose to ignore the wastes in Chengdu, and attack the Great Yu Kingdom with his Blood Wolf tribe. In his opinion, as long as the goddamn Qi King was eliminated, the Great Yu Kingdom would not be able to. Then there are opponents. Wu Shugu, I will prove me right like Father Khan. Bei Shan clenched his fist. Since he was able to lead the army, he has been competing with Wu Shugu, because everyone in the Golden Horde revered Wu Shugu so much, and even bluntly said that the future Tian Khan is him. He refused to accept it, so he asked to take his Blood Wolf tribe to the west to prove that he was a real wolf on the grassland. A series of victories made his prestige in the Golden Horde increasingly heavier, and it was only after returning to Chengdu that he realized that he was still far from Wushu. Although the tribal leaders began to respect him, they still liked the Wushu more. The feeling of always being trampled on by others makes him want to go crazy at times, and because of that, he takes every opportunity to show himself, to prove himself, and the King Qi who eliminated the Great Yu Kingdom is the proof, because now Wu Shugu has also set his sights on King Zhao. Before him, he wants to kill the King Qi to prove himself. Taiji, everything is planned. Guduo is harassing the Forbidden Army's food and grass. Chagatai besieged the 90,000 Forbidden Army 30 kilometers away from Jizhao City, and now there is only one cavalry outside Fencheng, and now there is one in Fencheng. A feint attack has been launched to contain them and prevent them from rushing to the aid of the food route. Bei Shan's tent was located between Jizhao and Fencheng, and he could get news from all sides at any time. HMPH, keep dragging on. I want to see how long the King Zhao army in Fencheng can hide inside. Bei Shan said fiercely. In fact, when he was besieging the King Zhao army, he saw another strange weapon of the King Zhao army. The power of this weapon was indeed surprising. This gave him even more reason to capture some King Zhao soldiers alive and ask what this weapon was. Outside Fencheng, Luo Quan and the barbarians have been fighting for several rounds. These barbarian cavalry seems to have no intention of fighting, and will retreat once they engage in combat, but once they lead their troops back to the camp, these cavalry will come back to attack again. Seeing this, Luo Quan sneered. These tactics of the barbarians were all used by him to deal with the barbarians when confronting the barbarian cavalry who came to harass him again. Luo Quan suddenly shouted loudly and led the 40,000 cavalry to charge the barbarian cavalry who feigned the attack retreated in shock. When the generals of the barbarian camp saw that the Forbidden Army of the Great Yu Kingdom suddenly turned from defense to attack, they immediately blew the emergency horn, and the sound of woo-woo resounded through Fencheng in the city. Niu Ben suddenly opened his eyes after hearing the barbarians' emergency rallying horn. This is the emergency rallying horn of the barbarians. It must be the arrival of the Forbidden Army. Niu Ben said suddenly. The other generals in the room were immediately overjoyed, and Lu Fei said, "Captain, what are you waiting for? Go out." After pretending to be a grandson for so many days, It's time to let the barbarians know how good we are these days. It's not that the King Zhao army is afraid of war, but Liu Ben has been waiting for the Forbidden Army to come, attacking the barbarians from inside and outside, and annihilating the main force of the barbarians in one fell swoop. Now the embargo has finally arrived. You immediately send someone to observe which direction the Forbidden Army is attacking, and gather soldiers to prepare to fight. Liu Ben said loudly. A group of generals heard the words and went to the army to deploy soldiers. However, the soldiers who went to observe them quickly returned. Captain, the barbarians from the north gate are gathering, but the Forbidden Army seems to have withdrawn again, because the cavalry assembled by the barbarians did not set out. Liu Ben frowned and said, "What is this Luo Quan doing?" Continue to monitor. The soldier turned back, and soon brought news that the Forbidden Army and the barbarian cavalry came and went, just trying to contain each other at this time. Liu Ben seemed to understand. Oh no, the barbarians are restraining the Forbidden Army. There must be a problem with the Forbidden Army's food and grass. Luo Quan is not attacking, he must be waiting for the news of the food and grass. If there is a big problem with the food and grass, he will only if you can retreat, save the food and grass first. Figured out this joint, Liu Ben asked the army to gather, ready to cooperate with the Forbidden Army from the north gate at any time. It's just that he waited for a day, and there was still a stalemate outside the city. Luo Quan was still impatient after being rushed by Liu Ben. After he sent reinforcements, the barbarians also sent reinforcements to fight for food, and they seemed to be unstoppable until their goals were achieved. He gradually understood Bei Shan's purpose. As long as the food and forage were destroyed, the 150,000-strong imperial army would face the same fate as the King Zhao army. Once the soldiers starved and lost their morale, the barbarians could exchange the least casualties for the greatest results. The night gradually enveloped the earth, and Luo Quan's heart became tighter and tighter. This expedition was too difficult. Jizhao, which is a flat river, is a natural battlefield for the barbarians, and because of the chaos of the army, they also lost the convenience of the city. The scout just received the news that Luo Hong also dispatched his own 10,000 cavalry in order to protect the food supply. Now the two sides are fighting endlessly over the food and grass. After a sleepless night, Luo Quan woke up early the next day. At this time, the other generals had gathered, waiting for his dispatch. Likewise, they are also waiting for news about forage. Each cavalryman comes with a part of dry food, so temporarily the food and grass can be eaten for a few days. If the dry food is eaten, trouble will follow. At this moment, a scout came galloping, and Luo Quan hurriedly asked, "How is the situation now?" "Return to General, the King Zhao army has arrived. The fire-breathing weapons in their hands are very powerful. Now the war is turning around." The scout said excitedly. "A fire-breathing weapon?" Luo Quan wondered because both sides are at a stalemate, and each other can only send part of their troops to fight around the grain road. Then reinforcements are very necessary. Ignoring what a fire-breathing weapon is for the time being, Luo Quan said, "Hey, these savage dogs, it's my turn, Luo Quan, to restrain you today." After that, he raised his whip and led the cavalry towards Fenchang. At this time, on the official road leading to Jizhao, the cavalry led by Qi Guanggai was catching and killing the barbarian cavalry on the vast land. In the fierce fighting day and night, the cavalry of the Forbidden Army suffered heavy casualties, and the battlefield was full of dead bodies of the Forbidden Army soldiers and barbarian soldiers. However, from the number of corpses, it can be seen that the Imperial Army was at a disadvantage in this fight. However, after the King Zhao army joined the battlefield, the situation was reversed, and 3,000 musketeers protected the food and grass on the food route. With every round of cavalry shooting with a weapon in his hand, the cavalry rushing over will fall down. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.